basically pull a fast one on the users of the financial market. Now, how do we ensure sustainability? How do we create sustainability of the financial markets? I believe there are three core tenets to that, or three core approaches to that. First of all is inclusivity. Whilst we moan about unbridled or uncontrolled inclusivity, as you can see in the saga of GameStop, but certainly we need all hands on deck. We need everyone's help as much as like we need everyone's understanding and also action to save our planet. Likewise, we need everyone's participation to ensure the financial market will continue to perform and to do what it's supposed to do. And education, I believe, is the linchpin between regulations and inclusivity. We certainly need more regulation, more innovative regulation, but linking these two concepts or factors are education. Education would sort of mold the way inclusiveness is done, would essentially tell the people who wants to participate in the financial market that there are certain codes of conduct or certain rules they have to observe, because without which it will be chaos, without which in the longer term, it will doom human race to this extinction. And regulations essentially set of good rules, but regulation is always lagging. Regulation can never catch up. So regulation needs, as much as we want regulation to be one step ahead, but regulation will always be one step behind or many steps behind. So education can help that to essentially make the regulators more forward-looking rather than reactive. Now, does blanket inclusivity undermine financial sustainability? I believe so, as you can see from GameStop and many more episodes where a group of people deliberately move up prices in the financial markets so that they profit at the expense of others. There are essentially 5 stakeholders, and the leaders of each of these 5 stakeholders must play a role in ensuring inclusivity is done in a more measured and controlled manner. These stakeholders are in the government, in the legislature, non-governmental organizations, the public, be it retailing public or just general public, and educators. And educators have a key role to play as much as we mold the minds at the thought process of our younger ones. Again, we have to essentially mold and teach retailing public or people that want to get into the financial markets to be responsible and to be ethical. Sorry, I keep mentioning about Hank Paulson. I believe he's a remarkable person. Essentially, he saves the world. By that, it sort of like stopped the American financial market from collapsing. And with that, it stopped the rut from actually sort of like contaminating the rest of the world. And this is what Hank Paulson had to say, is that no matter how the financial market is set up, no matter what the economic system is, as long as you have people, you're going to have financial crisis. And you're going to have bubbles that manifest themselves in the financial system. How true? So therefore, if inclusivity is about getting people involved, we need to find a way to regulate people, to basically, better than to educate them. It's not just the stick approach, we have to use the carrot approach, and that comes in by way of education. Just to make the presentation complete, and regulations. Regulation is a necessary evil, but as I say, regulation is shortcoming. There are always many steps behind. It's an ex post facto sort of redress mechanism. So as much as we can, there are 3 sort of like parts to regulation: enactment, education, and enforcement. There are more rules that need to be set up, but before the rules are set up, the regulators or members of the legislature needs to be educated as to what the proper role of financial markets are. And so I believe there are 4 core sets to this regulation, and what they call the structure, the disclosure, the qualification, in the sense that who gets involved in the financial market, how do they behave once they're in, and fair play. Fair play meaning that you cannot have collusion. And adjudication, the judges must be trained to adjudicate on areas or disputes that arise from what they call wayward practices or behavior in the financial markets. And enforcement, you have to keep up with them. So you must have technology that can sweep through, that can think ahead, that can essentially, I wouldn't say predict, but forecast where the next trouble area will be. Again, Hank Paulson has something to say, is that his comment is that whilst it is fine and good that we have regulation, we want more regulation, but there is a very real danger that financial regulation will become wolf and sheep's clothing. Essentially, that's what happened as lobby groups and pressure groups will basically wither down the full impact of the law. And regulation needs to catch up with innovation. And the last part of my presentation, which is very close to our heart, is that education, which is also a key theme of Professor Tan Sri Rector's presentation, it actually would help us reinforce the entire precept of sustainability. And in this context, education will build financial market sustainability. It is a linchpin between inclusivity and regulations. If we start out from the 1 o'clock direction of this schematics, the ultimate aim of this education is to create qualified, responsible market participant. Now, before that, this participant must have gone through an understanding of the concept of money. And in Malaysia, and as well as most Muslim countries, there's always a dichotomy between the Islamic understanding of money as opposed to the mainstream understanding of money. So it's always a question of whether money is a store of value or measurement of value as opposed to money being a factor of production. And we go into the topic of financial asset valuation, which unfortunately in today's world is only taught and being practiced by practitioners in the financial industry, services industry, which I believe it is a subject that should be made more pervasive, that students starting from high school should learn and master this subject. And financial management, which is part of any financial literacy course, is to teach a person how to manage his finances so that he wouldn't be caught short and he has sufficient financial resources to get by in his older days. And as the world is moving towards technology, artificial intelligence, more fast pace of working, we definitely need to understand innovation of technology. It's beyond the payment system. It is artificial intelligence and machine learning. How that interacts with the way we see risk, how the way we see rewards, and how do we price both of them. And financial market structure economic system, even though this sounds very macro in terms of knowledge impartation, but it's important to know how the market works, what infrastructure, what foundation does the financial market rest on. And regulation, this is the dreaded part. So it's essentially telling you the do and the don'ts. And lastly is social media, and something we cannot ignore. And you have to be sufficiently savvy, intelligent enough to differentiate what are good comments, what are good influence, what are good exchange on the internet before one gets into an engagement in the financial market. And last of all, I think this is very important, is even though it's a subject that's difficult to teach, but it's something that is a must and it's worth trying, is to infuse a high ethical sense, in the sense that a person must be taught that you can't live for the day, because if you do live for the day, you want everything to yourself, that will be at the expense of others. Now, if this behavior aggregates to such a phenomenal extent, right, either we as human race would essentially cease to exist because we will run out of resources. So in short, the financial market deals more than just financial resources. It deals, very important, with the issue of allocation of scarce resources. And educators, especially leaders of education, need to come to the forefront and force through the legislation and the government, and needs to work with the leaders in the government legislature to ensure that financial literacy, and more importantly, financial market knowledge, becomes part of the core curriculum in our schools. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Like I said, I do apologize for the sort of inefficiency of inability to use the slide presentation properly. I most welcome your questions questions and comments, and look forward to having a very fruitful discussion with you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. John Yip. And it has been very interesting and very brawny. And of course, we do have questions for you. But let me go back to Tan Sri, if Tan Sri is around, because we have about 15 to 20 minutes left for us to have a question and answer. Tan Sri, would you like to pick up any of those points that you have made, or shall I ask you this question that has been given to me for you?
Yeah, better do that. I'm not following the questions.
Right. Okay. So from your talk just now, from what you have presented, so this is something quite different. It says here, how relevant is the attribute of tabligh in the post-COVID era in terms of the e-leadership?
What is relevant again, Faiza?
What is the attribute of tabligh in the post-COVID era in relation to e-leadership?
Attribute of?
Tabligh.
Tabligh?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not too sure whether I can answer that directly, but certainly I think the post-COVID environment has exposed so many things that the two speakers have spoken. You know, in other words, the whole setting is all being very flaky. For example, from our point of view, education, when people say education and they will define, for example, world-class university. And we bought into this idea of world-class university and hence the ranking and so on and so forth. But when COVID comes in, we define in the world-class university itself, I think maybe Kim can help me with this. Yeah, there is racism in there. There's sexism in there. There's unethical questions there. Everything is there, but it's well hidden under the definition of world-class university. You know, and so when in university like us, when we say we want to have these values that John is talking about, we want the ethical foundation to be built, and suddenly we find that we're on a flaky ground. You know, and this is why I think it is a moment in time we need to define what we want. You know, it's not a one size fits all. It's not a one world. There are many worlds. People ask me, are you world class? I say, which world are we talking about? In my world, you may not be world class. In your world, I may not be first class. That's okay. But our foundation is very, very different. And I think this is where we need to start. If tabligh means this, then I think we are on to it. But I also have got a problem with tabligh because as much as Kim is critical of the 57 Muslim countries, I'm critical of the tabligh themselves. You know, when we talk about the COVID environment in Malaysia, they were the one who started it. If you are really into that tabligh, I think health must be, cleanliness must be top on your agenda. But you are not able to do that, then this word tabligh to me, sometimes we put question marks. I'm not an Arabic speaking person, but some of the words that we use, we assume a lot of things behind it. When it's cracked open, that values is not there. It becomes just a facade. And I think my worry is now we are living in the world of facade. Very, very much what John says, you know. Elon Musk can say many things and suddenly he got so many likes. Yeah? Kim said the same thing, but Kim doesn't get the likes for somehow or other. So we need to understand this very well. If we don't understand this very well, then we become sucked into people's, people's agenda, and suddenly we are lost. Our own agenda. Again, Kim says when we talk about Islamic State. The Islamic State, that I was worried when the time the word Islamic State was used. Is it what Islamic State is all about? But they have redefined it. Their Islamic State is this and this. So that I think is the work of us being the Indian University to redefine, to come into terms what actually it means. Modal insan, what does it mean? You know, do we go? Do modal insan and Sharia, does it go together? When I say Sharia modal insan, so these are our work because we have got the intellectual capacity to. But if we don't do this, then we cannot blame the masses. We cannot blame people who do not understand this. If that is tabligh, then I'm with you on this.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Dr. Kim, would you like to probably touch on what Tan Sri has said about, about the public and the world order and the ranking? Do you have something to say about that?
Well, first of all, 30 years ago, when I was in Islamic University, I used to have friends who invited me to join tabligh and sleep in the mosque for 40 nights. So I used to ask them, I said, if I have to save two houses that are burning, one is non-Muslim and the other one is Muslim, which one should I save first? And the tabligh's response was, you should save the Muslim's house first. When they gave me that reply, then I told them, maybe your moral foundation is not very solid and strong because it is purely based on identity affiliation to Muslim. What if that Muslim house is empty, but the other Muslim, non-Muslim house are full of people? So you should look at the context, but yet they continue the practice again. They're very nice and decent people, but in order to make the Ummah strong, nice does not cut it. You have to be very firm. Ethics are not easy to practice because it is enforced self-discipline. Jihad al-Akbar. It comes from deep inside. And the word jihad is not even properly used because when you go running around putting on suicide vests or ramming your cars, that is a form of kital, amok, madness. So jihad is all about self-exertion. So if in Confucianism, if you get the words wrong, then the chain reaction is very, very serious. So for example, adl. Adl actually comes from the root word of going up to the mouth of a camel and then adjusting yourself as the camel is going through the motion. That's adl. So adl has to be very dynamic. So as one of the governor of a state, he came running back to Khalifa Omar, radiallahu anhu. There has been a lot of stealing because of famine and drought. What should I do? Khalifa Omar said, declare darurat and make sure that all have enough to eat. So Islam is actually a very dynamic religion, but it doesn't tell you to go into extreme. For example, if you read Surah Al-Fatiha, just one surah, the word Siratul al-Mustaqim is actually at the middle section of the first surah. Because when you end at Amin, that's 2 syllables. So in other words, Surah Al-Fatiha has 12 altogether. But why is Siratul al-Mustaqim the middle section? So sometimes I'm not asking Muslims to play around with numbers. There are some people who believe that Bismillah or means 5, 6, 7 are the favorite words in the Quran. I'm not encouraging that, but epiphany of those nature can lead you into the spiritual have and make you more humble. Just to conclude, for instance, when you pray, you are in a fetal position. Why do we go back to the fetal position 5 times a day? Because the root word of insan is someone who is easily forgetful. So God is trying to produce a regime where you can constantly go back to your original state of fitra, nature. So on that note, I would encourage the public to read the work of Guy Eaton, a French Muslim philosopher, and inshallah, they will get enlightenment from that. But without any arrogance, they are free to challenge my view.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Kim. And going back to John, you mentioned about these 4 giants, yeah? Custom, Tan Chong, Tesla, Mercedes. And do you think they made it open, they made it public that what they do are sustainable, and whether or not they have included, it is inclusive in their everyday transaction? Because they are giants, people look at them. So what is your point? What is your perception on this one?
I can't comment on Tan Chong, but I can certainly comment about Daimler, and I have a lot of respect for this company. Not that I'm an investor. Now, they definitely have gone through a seismic shift in their business model. They're taking on the EV business head on. And they mean what they say, because Daimler, or the Germans, are built on a very different sort of mindset, right? It's always ground up. And they roll up the sleeve and go down to the factory floor, they work their way up, right? So when they say that, look, I can sort of like enforce my ESG core values, and they will do it, right? I'm sorry, it counts a bit like, you might think that why am I so against Tesla? Now, Tesla or Elon Musk is a fiction imagination, for lack of a better word, right? I have not seen him even rolling out steel and going to the factory floor as much as Jürgen Stramm, right? The CEOs of Daimler must have sort of like gone through the ranks from the factory floor. So that makes them very conscious of resources, right? And if you were to go through any sort of like annual reports or public communique of Daimler, you definitely see that they're very high on enforcing their ESG core values. And by that, I think they would have played a significant contributing role to sustainability. Right? They would have sort of lead. Now, Daimler was not caught in the diesel emission fabrication, right, as much as Volkswagen. Now, I have not seen that coming out of Tesla. Tesla has openly said that, look, these are our ESG core values, and we enforce it, and this is how we enforce it. It's all a hype. It's all Elon Musk tweeting. It's all everyone wants to play up and become a copycat. Like I say, we're going back to FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. So everyone jumps in, right? But if you go behind it, EV as a business proposition, it's actually very harmful to the environment. Let me give you an example why. The heart to any EV is lithium battery. And lithium is only mined in 2 countries, mainly 2 countries, Australia and Chile, right? And to produce a lithium battery, studies have shown that you need to sort of like emit 3 to 15 tons of carbon dioxide emission for every 1 ton of lithium battery produced, right? That 3 to 15 ton of carbon dioxide emission is what an average US household emits in a year, right? And it gets worse, right? For every EV cars that's produced, there's 60% more carbon dioxide emission. That are the figures that comes out in China, right? Someone like NIO would have volunteered the figure. So the question is EV the way forward to ensure that sustainability, right? So that's question mark. It's something that Elon Musk doesn't talk about, It's all the hype, you know, we're going to bring down the big boys are wasteful. Why are we keep digging out resources from the ground? There's a way out. But to produce electricity costs a lot. So if China were to go EV, how is China going to meet the electricity consumption demand? They're going to burn more coal. So you're going back to square one, right? So it's not necessarily a good thing. But answering your question, I think the big manufacturers who has been in the business for the longest time, like Daimler or even Toyota, when they say that, look, we're going to conform with ESG core values, we got to ensure that we play a part in sustainability, they will mean business. Back to Malaysia, I don't think we have seen that yet in any big organization. Sime Darby, I have not seen somebody coming out and say, look, hey, we are the poster boy of ESG and we are the champions of sustainability. This is how we're going to do it. From now on, nobody in our office use paper. We have not seen that in Malaysia. I think it's a question of education, it's a question of regulation in a way that human beings need to be regulated. Unfortunately, that's how we react. We need to be taught there's a carrot approach. We need to be punished. That's a stick approach. Or without which I think we would not act.
All right. Thank you so much, John. And now it's 1:04. So I think if we don't have any more questions, I would like to ask our eminent speakers to just give us like one word or two before bidding for goodbye to everybody. Yes, Dr. Kim.
I do not want to character assassinate anyone, but when it comes to the issue of sustainability, we have the light of Professor Jeffrey Sachs, one of the author of the Millennium Development Goals, right in Malaysia. So he is under the service of Tan Sri Jeffrey Chia. He has a Jeffrey Sachs Institute. He also has the Earth Institute in Columbia University. But what many people do not realize was that he left Harvard he got promoted as a professor at the age of 28, and then he left Harvard. He left Harvard because he was involved in some form of insider trading when he was advising President Boris Yeltsin. So unless he comes clean on what happened during that period when he encouraged Russia to jump into what is known as shock therapy, I don't think he has complete moral standing to talk about sustainability to Malaysians yet. Yeah.
All right, Tan Sri, do you one last
yes, thank you. I would like to add to what Kim says. I mean, sustainability is not a dominant of anybody. Sustainability relates to us, our life, our value, our civilization, and our norms. And everybody defines it the way it is. So there is no one standard American way or a British way. So what we are trying to do is to recognize being human in our context. So for example, if you talk about indigenous population, we need to understand them so that we can bring them to the fold and give them the dignity that they need. Americans do not understand. They can't even treat their own First Nation well. And then don't tell us what to do if you can't even do that. I mean, as I've mentioned again and again, if America can live on the resources of 5 planets, who are they to tell us what to do? You have got the model wrong, and you come to preach at us the kind of model that you do. I think this is the kind of tabligh that I worry about. I worry about. We just take things for granted, and then we think this is the way. So Muslim needs to think on their own, based on their own merits, their own tradition, their own values. And I think we have not done that enough. We are very fond of copying other people, I think because of our inferiority complex. I think we need to get rid of the inferiority complex. We need to redefine things on our own, and then we can move on. Otherwise, we will be stuck here And I really appreciate what John is saying. I mean, the way he analyzed it. Do we have got that kind of a perspective? The way Kim look at it as an outsider, quote unquote, at the mu'alaf, you have got an advantage that we do not have that advantage. We are born in a box and we think that the box is our world. We need to move out of the box. And I think this is the way to do it. If we don't do this, then I think we are forever having webinar over webinar, but nothing will change. Yeah. So thank you very much for that.
All right, thank you, Tan Sri. And finally, John. And I'll go back to Kim later.
Yeah, parting word is that I'm a great believer in education. I believe in the carrot approach. So financial education and financial literacy are both subjects that schools have overlooked or our government has overlooked. It's high time that we make it a core curriculum within our schools so that people from a very young age will understand how do we interact with money, what's the role of money, but more importantly, when you use money, there's an ethics, because if you're extremely selfish, you're extremely self-centered in the way you use money, as we can see, right? GameStop is one of them, the fluff up value of some of the stocks, like even, keep banging Elon Musk. Even like Elon Musk, I think you need to have built a sense of responsibility. If ever you've been propelled to such great heights, you have access to both financial resources and people networking, and you have to use that position responsibility. And that to me is sustainability. If you don't, if you turn deviant and essentially you seek instant gratification, that's where the whole system breaks down. They will not have any more sustainability. And as much as we want inclusivity in this democratized age, that comes with responsibility. So it is an inclusivity that has to be tempered with restraint. It has to be peppered with ethics. So those are my parting words.
All right, thank you. And finally, Dr. Kim.
Just very quickly, the less I said, the more impactful I hope, inshallah, it will be. With reference to what Tan Sri, Dr. Zols just said about an America living on 5 planets. Actually, the indigenous people in the world comprise of only 4%. And yet that 4% has managed to maintain their forests and civilization for 3,000 to 4,000 years until we adopted a model that is very savage. So do not underestimate the indigenous population's wisdom in preserving Mother Nature. Yeah.
This conversation, this discussion has become very interesting, but unfortunately, that's the only time that we have. And I would like to, on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to thank our 3 eminent speakers, Tan Sri, Dr. Kim, Dr. John, for gracing this event with your ideas and with your presence. Thank you very much again. And hopefully we can hear from you in one way or another, and probably come back to Alma Mater. All right, with that, thank you very much. I will ask Dr. Adli to take the center stage now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum. Thanks. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Professor.
See you again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you,
Dr.
Dr. Faiza, for moderating that forum. Please, if everyone can switch on their cameras, again, we'll take another screenshot. Okay, at the count of 1, 2, and 3. Again, 1, 2, and 3. Thank you, Dr. Kim. He's showing the peace sign.
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next session will be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we'll have a break for about 48 minutes. Yeah. So we can have lunch and perhaps perform our prayers, inshallah. And we leave on the note of which the rector mentioned just now regarding the spiritual Milky Way. Somehow Milky Way reminds me of that chocolate. but perhaps it's food for our spirit. I mean, our spirit as well. Yeah. So I'm not, marketing this chocolate anyway. So we'll meet again at 2 o'clock, inshallah. And we hope all of you who are with us on Zoom will still remain with us and be with us in the next session. Assalamu alaikum.
I just want to say thank you for Prof. Hamza for being a very good moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Creating change for sustainability requires well-designed initiatives to make a real impact on the ground, and this is the reason behind the establishment of Sejahtera Center for Sustainability and Humanity. The center is pushing for change towards sustainability in 3 focus areas: making IUM a green campus, creating Sejahtera neighborhood through RCE Greater Gombak, and reorienting education for sustainable development. Within 2 years of its establishment, despite limited resources, the center had driven significant changes towards whole institution transformation in the curriculum, research agenda, student activism, and daily operation towards sustainability, sejahtera, spirituality, and the futures.
The impact is proven when IIUM has won 3 international recognition: RCE Greater Gombak, the Sustainability Institution of the Year 2020, 8 RCE Awards 2020. The whole institution transformation then led to whole community transformation, which the impact can be seen in 3 outcomes. More than 200 refugees benefited from the engagement. More than 2,000 students have enrolled in sustainable development courses. More than 1,000 poor households have received aid and support from the center.
To ensure that changes for sustainability are really creating impact on the ground, the center has adopted 3 strategies. 1. All the initiatives conducted are multidisciplinary and multi-stakeholders towards transdisciplinary solution. Secondly, non-conventional communication strategies, moving away from the formalities, excessive protocols and bureaucracy. Thirdly, adopting the approach of connecting the dots for sustainability, believing that one small sustainability good practice can create a ripple effect towards bigger sustainable impact. These achievements and impacts are impossible without the presence of strong teamwork, unity, and selflessness of small number of committed, passionate, and talented people.
Baru masuk. Pukul 2 start lagi.
Oh, lagi.
Sedikit bisa juga.
My name is Daniel bin Muhammad Yusof. I'm the project leader for To Lead for Peace, which is also known as capacity building for Islam, peace, and civilizational development. There are 5 important summary points that I can make. Number 1, which is we have engaged with vulnerable targeted communities such as the youth in relation to addressing the issues of extremism and radicalization. Number 2, we also facilitate research through nationally and internationally funded grants on these targeted communities. Number 3, we emphasize on collaboration between national and international organizations. Number 4, we have also played the role as expert consultants to the country And finally, we are also developing a portal which is known as mycveguide.com. This refers to content development for education, training, as well as engagement with all of the stakeholders.
Being the winner of Sustainability Institution of the Year in 2020, indeed, this is another attempt by the university to follow up what we have done last year so that it becomes a long-standing commitment for the university and at the same time demonstrate that sustainability is a doable project for the university, for the community, and hopefully for the world at large.
Industrial Revolution 4.0 has caused the global state of health and well-being to deteriorate. Traditional knowledge has been on the verge of dilution, and the strike of COVID-19 pandemic has worsened the situation. Against this trend, IIUM embarked on a journey to promote sports as a lifelong learning towards good health and sustainable development. We introduced 3 game changers programs, which is indigenous sports, para sports, and Sejahtera Discourse series. And this is Sejahtera Sports for All. This project has made the university community to appreciate indigenous sport as a means for healthy lifestyle. At the same time, Para Games have instilled the values whereby the university community is much more appreciative and sensitive towards the need of the disabled community.
Being the winner of
Industrial Revolution 4.0 has caused the global state of health and well-being to deteriorate. Traditional knowledge has been on the verge of dilution, and the strike of COVID-19 pandemic has
And I would like to contextualize this meeting today is what we call celebrating IIM 2020.
Hari ini, Perintah Kawalan Pergerakan dilaksana di seluruh negara bagi mengekang penularan COVID-19.
Perintah Kawalan Pergerakan mulai 18 Mac 2020 iaitu lusa hingga 31 Mac 2020 di seluruh negara.
Let me reassure you, as far as I am concerned, the situation in the university is well under control.
Universiti Islam Antarabangsa Malaysia UIAM menghasilkan prototipe robot yang boleh membantu doktor berdepan dengan pesakit dengan membuat saringan dari jarak jauh. Robot yang diberi nama Medibot dibangunkan pakar robotik kuliah kejuruteraan dan kuliah teknologi maklumat komunikasi. Dilengkapi alat kawalan jauh bervisual, doktor berinteraksi dengan pesakit tanpa perlu bersemuka. Pasukan khas ini terdiri daripada pencarah, pentadbir dan pelajar yang tinggal dan menginap di kampus Gombak. PPE yang dihasilkan akan dihantar ke Pusat Perubatan UIAM di Kuantan Pahang dan lain-lain hospital yang akan dikenalpasti oleh Malaysian Relief Agency MRA.
Sementara itu, Universiti Islam Antarabangsa Malaysia UIAM mencatat sejarah sebagai institusi pengajian tinggi pertama di negara ini tersenarai sebagai finalis untuk 2 penganugerahan lestari antarabangsa. 2 anugerah itu adalah anugerah Green Gown antarabangsa dalam kategori institusi lestari terbaik dunia dan anugerah memanfaatkan masyarakat menerusi program Light.
Change the stereotype image of Islam and Muslims in the world.
Anugerah ini merupakan pengiktirafan bagi universiti untuk membuat satu perubahan atas kepakaran yang telah diiktiraf oleh bangsa-bangsa bersatu dalam hal ini.
kit yang kami hasilkan atau kit kami ialah kit pantas atau dipanggil rapid test kit menggunakan teknologi iaitu nanoteknologi.
Thank you once again, and I look forward to working with you closely for the year 21, 22 and beyond, and I hope we can come together in a more cohesive way after this when we start looking at the roadmap 2021 to 2022 and also taking other initiatives like the Sejahtera Academic Framework and other things that will come by as we move forward in trying to understand what the future will be like. In the last 2 years, we have been trying to manage to change an university into a university that is truly international and sustainable. In this way, we are able to move as much as possible nature of education for the future by changing not only the structure of the university, but also the knowledge base as far as the university is concerned. In other words, IIUM is moving into a whole institutional transformation, taking with it the national education philosophy, sustainable development goals, United Nations 4 pillars of learning, and other very important foundation as far as the university is concerned.
Among the things we do to transform IUM as a sustainability institution was to rename some of the offices and centers to suit their functions to promote sustainability agendas such as responsible research, student development, community engagement, and knowledge for change. We also introduced holacratic leadership and management, where everyone in the campus is empowered and entrusted to carry out their sustainability initiatives.
Within a year, the impact of 29 flagship projects created could clearly be seen in 5 areas. First, the breaking down of academic administrative silos in a transformational way. 2, the building of voluntary teams and teamwork across the academic structure based on shared aspirations. 3, allowing for greater creativity and social innovation in translating SDGs into local context. 4, enhancing community engagement in co-problem solving based on SDG. And lastly, capturing data and information to be transformed into knowledge and wisdom.
The formal classroom education is now linked to our co-curricular activities, which give more meanings to our community engagement projects through learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, learning to live together, and learning to become.
I hope you have been able to see the G's of transformation that we are trying to do for the last 24 months using the whole institutional transformation and also carving a new idea of what a human university is all about as a kind of novelty for the future.
We are a place of accomplishments. From humble beginnings, we have broken barriers and records. From the rawness of basic knowledge, we have instilled values. Values that inculcate the blossoming of minds and the bestowing of virtue. Our accomplishments have touched the lives of so many. For indeed, our infusing of virtue with knowledge has been the key to our success. Why are we always striving? Why do we keep pushing the boundaries? Why do we constantly try to bring out the best in each of us? Because here, no matter where you're from, you are accorded the same right to succeed. We want them to build a better future, where good is not just created, but sustained. We stand for excellence in our students, shaping their values and developing the world. We strive for inspiration in our graduates, inspiring their dreams into reality. We want to go beyond the imaginable and bring out virtue beyond any barriers. To improve the quality of life everywhere, physically and spiritually. provides the best conducive learning environment for all students, offering a wide variety of amenities in the pursuit of knowledge. Opening avenues to reach the furthest realms of enlightenment. The International Islamic University of Malaysia, the garden of knowledge and virtue.
We make the world a better place forever. Expand the culture of Iqra. IUM is to realize the meaning of mercy to all the world for
And I would like to contextualize this meeting today is what we call celebrating IIM 2020.
Hari ini, Perintah Kawalan Pergerakan dilaksana di seluruh negara bagi mengekang penularan COVID-19.
Perintah Kawalan Pergerakan mulai 18 Mac 2020 iaitu lusa hingga 31 Mac 2020 di seluruh negara.
Let me reassure you, as far as I am concerned, the situation in the university is well under control.
Universiti Islam Antarabangsa Malaysia UIAM menghasilkan prototipe robot yang boleh membantu doktor berdepan dengan pesakit dengan membuat saringan dari jarak jauh. Robot yang diberi nama Medibot dibangunkan pakar robotik kuliah kejuruteraan dan kuliah teknologi maklumat komunikasi. Dilengkapi alat kawalan jauh bervisual, doktor berinteraksi dengan pesakit tanpa perlu bersemuka.
Pasukan khas ini terdiri daripada pencarah, pentadbir dan pelajar yang tinggal dan menginap di kampus Gombak. PPE yang dihasilkan akan dihantar ke Pusat Perubatan UIAM di Kuantan Pahang dan lain-lain hospital yang akan dikenalpasti oleh Malaysian Relief Agency MRA.
Sementara itu, Universiti Islam Antarabangsa Malaysia UIAM mencatat sejarah sebagai institusi pengajian tinggi pertama di negara ini tersenarai sebagai finalis untuk 2 penganugerahan lestari antarabangsa. 2 anugerah itu adalah anugerah Green Gown antarabangsa dalam kategori institusi lestari terbaik dunia dan anugerah memanfaatkan masyarakat menerusi program Light.
Change the stereotype image of Islam and Muslims in the world.
Anugerah ini merupakan pengiktirafan bagi universiti untuk membuat satu perubahan atas kepakaran yang telah diiktiraf oleh bangsa-bangsa bersatu dalam hal ini.
Kit yang kami hasilkan atau kit kami ialah iaitu kit pantas atau dipanggil rapid test kit menggunakan teknologi iaitu nanoteknologi.
Thank you once again, and I look forward to working with you closely for the year 21, 22 and beyond, and I hope we can come together in a more cohesive way after this when we start looking at the roadmap 2021 to 2022 and also taking other initiatives like the Sejahtera Academic Framework and other things that will come by as we move forward in trying to understand what the future will be like. In the last 2 years, we have been trying to manage to change the university into a university that is truly international and sustainable. In this way, we are able to move as much as possible nature of education for the future by changing not only the structure of the university but also the knowledge base as far as university is concerned. In other words, IIUM is moving into a whole institutional transformation, taking with it the national education philosophy, sustainable development goals, United Nations 4 pillars of learning, and other very important foundation as far as the university is concerned.
Among the things we do to transform IUM as a sustainability institution was to rename some of the offices and centers to suit their functions to promote sustainability agendas such as responsible research, student development, community engagement, and knowledge for change. We also introduced holacratic leadership and management, where everyone in the campus is empowered and entrusted to carry out their sustainability initiatives.
Within a year, the impact of 29 flagship projects created could clearly be seen in 5 areas. First, the breaking down of academic administrative silos in a transformational way. 2, the building of voluntary teams and teamwork across the academic structure based on shared aspirations. 3, allowing for greater creativity and social innovation in translating SDGs into local context. 4, enhancing community engagement in co-problem solving based on SDG. And lastly, capturing data and information to be transformed into knowledge and wisdom.
The formal classroom education is now linked to our co-curricular activities, which give more meanings to our community engagement projects. Through learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, learning to live together, and learning to become.
I hope you have been able to see the gist of transformation that we are trying to do for the last 24 months using the whole institutional transformation and also carving a new idea of what a human university is all about as a kind of novelty for the future.
Assalamualaikum Prof. Shukran. So we shall wait for the others to join ya, Prof. InsyaAllah.
Yes.
Yes, Prof is already online.
Ustaz Aziz is online. And then the next one will be Mr. Aziz. Right? And then we also have Imam Faisal.
Prof, sometimes your line is not clear. Dia macam intermittent sikit. Ke ataupun
my line?
Dia macam lagging sikit, Prof.
Who's mine?
Yes. Yes. A bit lagging.
Oh, I thought
Then it's lagging, Prof.
Is it lagging over there or here? I'm fine here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can hear us. You can hear me well.
Yes.
Okay. Now I can hear you very well. Just now it's a bit lagging. Okay. Hopefully nothing. No hiccups. Inshallah. Okay.
All right. Inshallah.
So we shall wait for the others to join.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right.
I'll excuse myself first and I'll be back shortly.
Yeah, sure. Dr. Kim, yes, please.
Dr. Kim.
No problem.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum, Prof. Shukran. How are you?
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah. I'm fine, thank you.
Good to see you despite virtually.
Yes, of
Oh,
course.
hari itu kita ada jumpa kat kedai makan. Assalamualaikum, Imam Faisal, Abdul Rauf.
Salam.
What's the time in New York? I think it's about 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning.
It's 3 a.m. in New York.
Allahu Akbar.
Thank you
for agreeing to join us, even though at this odd hour.
It's my pleasure.
We are most happy to have you with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you and an honor to be with you.
And I see you're wearing the Malaysian batik, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, because I saw Tan Sri Zul wearing batik and I saw Adim wearing batik. So I figured, I should wear batik.
MashaAllah, very beautiful.
Because that's that seems to be the the uniform for today. So I said,
yes. I'll change my uniform tomorrow. I'll be wearing batik tomorrow then. So we'll begin in 1 more minute, inshallah.
Yeah. But I don't need to have my camera on right now, right?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
I'll mute myself as well.
Okay.
That is even more important, I think.
Okay, dapur dua boleh start. Shall we? Okay, is all our panelists with us, Prof. Shukran?
I saw Professor Abdul Aziz just now.
Okay.
Faisal is here. I think Dr. Azib is here as well.
Yes, Prof. Yes.
Okay, that's good. So we have all of the speakers with us, alhamdulillah. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon to all of you, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, those joining us on Zoom and also on YouTube. Welcome back to the international webinar on humanizing leadership. So we'll move on to the third session for today, which is another forum which will be moderated by none other than Professor Dr. Shukran Abdul Rahman, who is currently the Dean of Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman Kulliyah of Islamic Liberal Knowledge and Human Sciences. Professor Shukran is a professor at the Department of Psychology who teaches personnel psychology, psychometrics, organizational change and development, career development, and issues in personnel and organizational psychology. His research areas include career development, organization development, organizational behavior, academic culture, changes and development in higher education, employability, and graduateness of students in higher learning institutions. Without further delay, I pass the floor to Professor Dr. Shukran Abdul Rahman.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Amin. Amma ba'd. Thank you, my brother Dr. Adli, for presiding this session. Our great panelists, Professor Abdul Aziz Berkaut, Imam Faisal, and also Brother Aziz. All right, so today we are going to continue learning after much that we have learned this morning from our panelists and from our keynote speaker, I believe. They have shared their experience. They have also shared their view, their knowledge, which I myself have been enthused. I believe all of you must have been inspired much by the knowledge shared by the great speakers as well. And in this session, we are going to look at how we could relate the knowledge, the wisdom, the experience that we have learned from them to contexts that we are currently operating or that we are going to operate in future. Right, so the topic that we are going to discuss this afternoon is leadership and cultural intelligence, which both are both are after my heart. Two important constructs are there: leadership and cultural intelligence. But Professor Aziz and the other panelists, this term intelligence has been deliberated much in various contexts, in the context of emotion, in the context of intellectual, spiritual, and this afternoon, this construct intelligence is modified by one important context, which is culture, right? So there are a number of dots that we are going to connect, Professor Aziz and all panelists this afternoon. We are going to look at the role of leaders. So how do we link the, leaders that we have in our surrounding? They might be community leaders, they might be political leaders, or institutional leaders like university leaders themselves, okay, towards university. So what are the roles of leaders towards university for community? I think this is a very important topic that we need to deliberate, especially after listening to, new ideas, new inspiration this morning. So how could we, as leaders, either in institutions of higher learning or corporate organization or community setting, okay, relate to university, and what can we expect from university in empowering the community? I believe Professor Aziz, Mr. Aziz, and also Imam Faisal will help us to understand and to connect the dots across the important points that I have mentioned just now. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you the first speaker, who is Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Bergaut. Professor Dr. Abdul Aziz Bergaut is currently the Dean for International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization in IIUM. Professor Aziz is the former Deputy Rector of Internationalization and Global Network in the International Islamic University, Malaysia. He began his deputy rectorship in the year 2011 until 2018. He was also the former Sheikh of the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization. He's a member of the Board of Directors of the Center for Higher Education and Scientific Research Ethics in FUIW. Let me try. Federation of University in Islamic World. Am I right, Professor Aziz?
Correct.
And the SSCO, right? He's also advisor to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, on cultural, on social and family matters, starting from 2020 until 2023. He's the honorary Deputy President of the Union of Afro-Asia Universities, starting this year until 2023 as well. Professor Abdul Aziz Bergaut currently serves as full Professor of Islamic Studies and Civilization in the Department of Fundamental and Interdisciplinary Studies of the Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman Kuliah of Islamic Review Knowledge and Human Sciences. Professor Aziz has long CV, and I better stop here, otherwise we will not listen to his wisdom. All right, Professor Aziz, the screen and time are yours.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Prof. Shukran and our professors, doctors, participants, let me first thank you for the invitation. I would like to thank our university for inviting me to this. I'm very glad that our Prof. Richter is with us here in this 2 days webinar, and we have heard some of his thoughts and ideas this morning when it comes to the issue of humanizing leadership. I think we are talking about a very serious, a very important topic of merit and interest, not only to IIUM, not only to Malaysia, not only to the Islamic world, but I think it's worldwide, as we notice, and it's quite clear in many parts of the world. And based on facts and what's happening in the world, from the environment issues to social issues to poverty issues, all these issues, I think all these things might send to us the signal that we have a issue of leadership. We have issue of leadership at the world level, not only at our own selves, but I think there is an issue that we need to address. That's why comes this idea of humanizing leadership. And I think this is something very great and very important. Prof. Shukran, I want just to know how many minutes there for me to talk.
Okay, you have about 30 minutes, Prof. Aziz.
Okay, so that
can
I
you
can
kindly put your slides in the presentation mode, please?
Okay, let me see whether you can just bear with me before I let me see here. Okay, Prof. Shukran, can you see that?
Yes, we can see it in the presentation mode now. Thank you.
Okay, once again, dear brothers and sisters, I think what we have heard this morning is really great and sets the almost the framework what we heard from our Prof. Richter himself, talking about why we need this humanizing education, and then comes the interview with the minister from Minister of Education from Indonesia. I think he raised and he put many things, connected many dots already. Even the name of the ministry itself tells a lot about what the world needs and what type of leadership that we need at all levels now and in the future. When you talk about the ministry which handles education, and then culture, and then technology, then science, this is something very, very great, and that's what we are looking for. Imagine a minister of education looks also at science, and then he will maybe use the model of humanizing science and also talk about culture, which is actually the core of what I'm going to explain to you today. And also we talk about technology. This is really something important that we need to capitalize on when we talk about humanizing education. And for that matter, we will talk about humanizing economics, humanizing science and technology, humanizing governance, humanizing management, humanizing everything that we do. So this is very important thing to start with. Brothers and sisters, I'm going to address two questions here. One of them, how to change. I think here we talk about how to change the mindset of leaders inside universities so that it can be extended to outside community, and also how cultural intelligence help us in dealing with sensitive issues related, I think, to religion. That's the guiding questions I received for this speech. But as Prof. Shukran mentioned, I will also address some other things. Brothers and sisters, we are talking about mindset, we are talking about leadership. Humanizing leadership means we are talking about behavior, we are talking about psychology, we are talking about soul, heart, character, senses, and actually that's the missing component that is not really linked in a very consolidated and integrated way to economy, to finance, to the things that we do in life. And they make almost 90% of our life is more on numbers, on KPIs, whether we talk about economy or education or in the indices of happiness or indices of health or indices of economy or finance, or all these numbers need somehow to be linked to what we are talking about today, which is humanizing leadership, and for that matter, humanizing many other things, as I mentioned. If you see here in this quote here, which I just brought here, in times of change, there are two types of people, leaders and everyone else. You want to be in the leaders camp? You want to be the person acting and creating the future? You must believe you have agency and act upon it. So, brothers and sisters, from here, we need to understand that when we talk about leadership, it's not talking about leadership as we see it in books. and we read it in the best-selling books. But we talk about it in the real context where we have all these huge issues and challenges and problems, and the latest of which is this pandemic. So how leadership becomes a transformative kind of a culture of action, of doing and creating life opportunities, alternatives, and so on and so forth. And I think one of the best places where to talk about this transformative concept of leadership and translate it is the universities. As considered the leading institutions in any community, in any society. So that's why we are talking about leveling education, how education becomes the strong means for sustainable development, for creating desirable life, brothers and sisters. The second question, which I said I'm going to address here, is talking about cultural intelligence as one of the important aspects, or also means or ways how we can create synergy, how we can create solutions, how we can move or walk the talk. Brothers and sisters, when we talk about cultural intelligence, I will shortly put it in a different context so that you see the bigger picture, and then we come back and talk about how universities can play a role in this respect. So if I just read for you this quote here, which is a beautiful one: when we increase our cultural intelligence, we begin to identify our biases. So it's really great to understand that cultural intelligence becomes one important thing that we should be doing, brothers and sisters. But let me tell you that I would like to address these questions, or the question of intercultural intelligence and how we relate it to leadership and humanizing leadership, from two important, I may say, approaches or integrated ways how we look at humanizing leadership. The first one is we need to understand the model of what we call multiple intelligences leadership model. So, brothers and sisters, as human, and it's well known in many sciences now, these multiple intelligences, that as a human, we have all these intelligences. The question now, whether we are using them or not, whether we are grooming them or not, whether we are investing in them or not, whether when we study leadership, for example, or do humanizing leadership, whether we look at it just from one perspective of this intelligence that the humans have, or multiple intelligences. So to me, I think dealing with leadership, it's a must to talk about multiple intelligences, because leadership cuts across all these levels of life, all actions, whether we are in education or in economics or in politics or in society or in technology or science. These multiple intelligences influences us as humans, and practically these things are happening in our life. But whether we realize that, we need, in order to humanize education, in order to make, to humanize leadership, and to make leadership a very effective and dynamic way of changing things and achieving our goals in life, whether we link it to these multiple intelligences or not. So that's one way how we look at this model of leadership. The other one is, as our rector and also the minister this morning mentioned, talking about system approach. I think it will be very difficult for us now and in the future to understand the world, to understand how things are functioning, to understand our issues and problems and challenges, from the pandemic to environment to health to poverty. All this, I think, system analysis, system thinking, system approach will become part and parcel of our leadership qualities. I don't think that we have, let's say we talk about leadership, and our leaders or those who are leading, they don't have that system analytic approach or competencies or abilities, because the nature of the issues we face, the nature of the problems the world is facing, they become interconnected to the extent that you cannot even understand by using the reductionist approaches or even the current approach. That's why transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary should become now not only something that we say it's an approach, but skills, competencies of our student, whether they are undergraduate or postgraduate, or they are specialized in this science area or human science or religious studies. I think we need all to learn the skills of multiple intelligences and also of what we call system approach. Brothers and sisters, talking about humanizing leadership, we need not only to talk about, based on the introduction that I mentioned, system approach and multiple intelligences. I think when we talk about humanizing leadership, we need to talk to look at it from this multi-perspective, in which you cannot talk about leadership or humanize leadership without many kind of intelligences. Number one, spiritual intelligence, mental intelligence, emotional intelligence, physical intelligence, moral intelligence, and many others, brothers and sisters. So I think the approach we need to use to understand how we do humanizing leadership, because humanizing leadership starts from humanizing the leaders, humanizing the mind, the soul, the heart, the people. Then comes all other types of leadership and its application. So it's very important to see the link between cultural intelligence, intellectual intelligence, and spiritual intelligence and emotional intelligence, and for that matter, other types of, why I'm mentioning this, because later on in the universities, if you want to create or to build leaders of the future who can be the asset or the human talents who will be doing human or humanizing education or leadership or politics or technology, you need those minds to be by themselves humanized. So you need in our curriculum or in our co-curricula of the universities or institutions to make this type of intelligences visible, and they become part and parcel of the training, the education, not only of the student, but the teacher, the professor, the researcher, those who will be educating the world or producing or creating knowledge and ideas. So it's very important to understand this. From this, brothers and sisters, there is a lot of huge material in today talking about spiritual intelligence, talking about, these are books, huge resources on this, talking about spiritual and emotional intelligence, talking about cultural intelligence, talking about the importance of these cultural competencies in our life. Why I'm mentioning all these books, I'm just trying to conclude that we need all this, and we need a model which puts all these things together, brothers and sisters. I think our Richter, long time ago, has developed this model. And this model, which integrates what we call the sustainable development goals and also the value system. Here we are talking about culture and cultural. And from here, from this framework, will come later on cultural competencies, cultural diplomacy, cultural intelligence, and all these things to become part and parcel of developing the leaders or the people who will be handling the issues of ecology or society or the economy. So brothers and sisters, when we talk about this cultural intelligence, we need to see it in this context. On the one hand, related to the human in all this perspective, in which we have spiritual, cognitive, and all this. And also it's related to development, to doing. We cannot just, for example, groom or nurture people who have the skills, all types of skills of employability, but they don't have the skills, the spiritual skills, or the cultural intelligence skills, or the leadership or humanized leadership skills. So brothers and sisters, from this perspective, it is important to understand that cultural intelligence linked to other type of intelligences, and all this linked to what we call humanizing leadership, becomes an important aspect of making change and doing transformation. So just to summarize the theoretical introduction, brothers and sisters, it is very important to have this integrated leadership model where you have cultural intelligence. Under cultural intelligence, we can talk about, if I look at it from Islamic perspective, this concept of ta'aruf is very deep in Islam. And the verse of the Quran says, we have created you from a single pair of male and female and made you into nations and tribes, means cultures, people, ethnicities. And then the most honored of you is the one who is pious or got a good heart, soul, action. So when we talk about this concept in Islam, under this idea of cultural intelligence, ta'aruf in Islam requires dealing with people, requires understanding, appreciation, acceptance, tolerating, giving, caring, serving, benefiting, honoring, and all this to be based on piety, on goodness. So this is just one simple example or aspect of cultural intelligence. Then comes engagement, where you need relations, communication, skills, values, attitudes, managing cultures, your own culture and other cultures, exchanging with other people, cooperating, and then it includes also transformation. How do you make impacts, changes? How do you influence? And here where leadership comes. Because if leadership just linked to creating ideas without influence, impact, change, and improve and get success, then it's not really what we are looking for. So this is just one aspect of this model of integrated leadership where cultural intelligence becomes very, very crucial. But cultural intelligence alone is not enough for leadership. You need emotional intelligence, and everybody knows what is emotional intelligence. And you need spiritual intelligence. And in fact, if you want to put them in a hierarchy, you will get the IQ, the intellectual, then you get the social, then you get the cultural, then you get the emotional. But you will find that the heart of all this model is actually spiritual. You can be sophisticated in your cultural intelligence. You know your culture, you can deal with others, you know the sensitivities, you have the skills, you create relations, but for what purpose? For what reason? For what aim? So spiritual intelligence in this model is very important. So brothers and sisters, talking about humanizing leadership is creating leaders who understand all this. And above all, they know that spiritual intelligence is crucial. And I think if you remember this morning when we talk about SDG 18, as mentioned by Prof. Zul. SDG, what is SDG 18? Is actually linking all the dots of all types of intelligences and putting them in a context and give meaning, give purpose, give sense of ethicality and connection to all what we do. I think leaders, whether in the political areas or finance or management, or they will all need that kind of what we call, brothers and sisters, the substance, the jawhar, without which I think will be hard for us to humanize leadership. Because humanizing leadership, it's not only about skills, it's not only about competencies, it's not only about smartness, it's not only about, but it's about the substance. That's why, brothers and sisters, if I use this iceberg here, I can tell you that all these things which we see happening in the world here are all these outer things, but there are levels of what we call the real things to do humanizing education. And the bottom here you see in the foundation, you will find spirituality as the reservoir of all these things, then moving to creating that humanity. And then you come to the civilization where you start building the balanced things, brothers and sisters. Now, based on this, brothers and sisters, I want to come back now to the two questions which I mentioned in the beginning. When we want to talk about a role of universities or how to change the mindset of leaders inside the university, brothers and sisters, in the university where we have all these multiple intelligences, there where you have all types of leadership, the transformative leadership, the conservative leadership, the synergic leadership, all types of leadership are in a university. So it is there where change happens, and there where we can create the leaders that they can advance this cause of humanizing leadership. So, brothers and sisters, in the university where our ecosystem, our culture, our teaching and learning, our curriculum takes place, there where we impart what we call the humanizing leadership. And that's why lecturers, professors, researchers, and all the people in that ecosystem, from the whether the academician or the administrator, or all are subject to this what we call leadership change, leadership building. Here where comes our competencies, our abilities, our approaches. Here where comes what we call the multi and interdisciplinary things. But in the university, we provide to people training, we provide to them skills, competencies, but it is very important that the ecosystem and the culture becomes more based on self-directed learning, so that each and everyone in the institution knows that he has a mission, knows that he has to achieve this purpose or this goal. Once this happens, our leadership model moves from talking about what to why. Why we want to humanize leadership, why we want to have a model of what we call humanized university. Why? Why? Because we need to change and to address the real big issues that humanity is facing. That all types of issues and problems that we are facing today, when we say why, we are humanizing education, why we are looking for a university that can change the world, because we understand the severity of the issues and the problems. We understand what type of knowledge we need, what type of ideas we need, what type of people we need, what type of leadership we need. Then the question becomes, is it that our job as a university just producing people, graduates to go to the industry, or we are asking the question, what quality of leaders, what quality of graduates, what quality of people we need, what quality of leadership we need in these graduates. So brothers and sisters, I think it's very important here to understand that all things are interrelated and interlinked, and changing mindsets starts when you know and you position the university in its right foots and the right purpose and goal and job of the university, the job which is transforming the society. And by saying this means you need transformative leaders. You need to create leaders with all these multiple intelligences for a mission, for a sense of changing things. So all our curriculum, co-curricula, all our programs need to address this question: are we really nurturing the leaders the world wants, or the society wants, or the community is waiting for? Here, based on this, we need to really look into all what's happening in our teaching and learning, in our curriculum, in our programs, and find out whether all these are leading to that type of humanized leadership, humanized knowledge, humanized science or not. This is very important. Now, to move forward, when it comes to cultural intelligence, brothers and sisters, as I told you, it's very important, because possessing cultural intelligence, cultural competencies that are related to spiritual intelligence on the one hand, and also linked to emotional intelligence on the other hand, and linked on the other hand to intellectual intelligences, will give you synergy, will give you abilities and competencies that helps you deal with all types of situations. That's why, brothers and sisters, cultural intelligence in our context in the universities, especially a university like IIUM or those multicultural universities where they have a lot of cultures, Muslim, non-Muslim, from different countries, it becomes the nature of the university itself. We need it like not for luxury, or we just teach it to our student in the co-curricula. It needs to become a must, like spiritual intelligence or spirituality, like emotional. These things need to become in the mainstream, not just in the margin when we put them, let's say, in just some marginal programs here and there. No, they should be in the core ecosystem of the university, so that we are all heading towards creating this type of things. Brothers and sisters, cultural intelligence helps do a lot of things, not only deal with religious sensitivities, but also cultural, but also ethnic, but also economic, but also all types of encounters that people can face. Cultural intelligence can help give you the abilities, the competencies, the mind, the mindset, the way how you look at others, the way how you see other cultures, the way how you see those cultures becoming your feeder of wisdom, of knowledge, of understanding, of appreciating others. As I said in the verse of the Quran, when God says, we created you into these big nations and big people to know one another, what does mean knowing one another from a sociological perspective, from a cultural perspective? It means that each and every culture today in the world is unique in certain things which are not in my culture, or in that one culture, or in the other one culture. So our job is to know one another, because you have certain unique things which others they don't have. And by knowing these things, we expand our mind, our horizon, our understanding, our culture, our engagement, our connection with others, and adding with this understanding of cultural intelligence, adding the spiritual intelligence means talking about purpose in life, talking about meanings, talking about connection with God, life, and the fellow humans. Then you will create a kind of a mindset, a kind of a culture, a kind of a leadership where these type of leaders, they have all this depth, the spiritual depth, they have all this cultural depth, cultural understanding, and also they have this emotionality in dealing with all types of psychologies, all types of souls and people, and they have that IQ, and they have that mission in life. So brothers and sisters, universities are the place where we impart and teach these types of things. And that's why we should be the leaders in this. And in the universities where the solutions should come from. And if in the universities we ourselves become the problem, then how we can be later problem solvers. So I think there is a lot to be done in our universities and institutions, especially of higher education. And I think we need really to realign things and relook at things in this spectrum of all what's happening in the world, so that we can see how we articulate cultural intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and emotional intelligence, but for a purpose, for a synergy, for solving problems, not just for knowledge or cognitive satisfaction, but for solving the problems. Now, brothers and sisters, taking our university, for example, as an example, and how we become involved in social change, in transformation. How, after almost 38 years, how we try to develop a model where the cognitive part, the affective, the spiritual, and the cultural. And today, we talk about how a university becomes an agent of real transformation, where the professor, the student, the administrator, all are thinking about the social impact, the social influence of knowledge, of education, of spirituality, of religion, of all this. So we are moving based on all this and trying to see cultural intelligence, spiritual intelligence in that direction of becoming a problem solving. So our curriculum, our co-curriculum, our ecosystem, our culture, trying to engage everybody in becoming a problem solver. This is the transition from a university which is only breeding graduates, teaching knowledge, transferring knowledge, to a university that wants to change, wants to give a model. Here where these concepts of what we call humanizing education, humanizing leadership, humanizing science, humanizing technology become of a great meaning and importance to us. Because in the end, if the university, okay, yeah, how many minutes, Doctor?
Yeah, my apologies. Maybe we can enjoy from you in 5 more minutes. And
great.
Then, yeah.
Now, great. Okay. So if I consider all what I mentioned in all these 25 minutes is an introduction, just to relate this to some examples of how Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet of Islam, provides a great example of what we call humanizing education, leadership, in which you see cultural intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and all other types in action. Example, brothers and sisters, you remember, because the question here talks about how we use cultural intelligence to deal with our religious sensitivities. You remember when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ started his da'wah and he was tortured and pressured in Mecca, and then he asked his people, the companion, the first group of people, he told them, please go to Abyssinia, Al-Habasha, Abyssinia, and there is a king there who is a Christian king, and that king is a just king, and people are not oppressed in his land. This is a very, very important, great leadership kind of a decision taken by Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to solve a problem which was faced by his people, and they were tortured to the limit. And look at the Prophet, how he knew about that leader, that person, the land of that person, the people in that country, and how he made a decision to tell the Muslims who were just in the first early years of their dawah, of their mission, and they are bringing a new religion which is based on Tawheed, and telling them, please go to a land of a Christian king, and he will help, and he is a just person. Maybe if it happens somewhere in our history later or today, the first thing the narrow-minded people will say, how come? How come we go to another land, a king with a different religion, and this is not correct? No, look at the understanding of culture, to understanding of the mind of the person, the intelligence, the leadership, and the decision was great. And it was a great solution when it comes to IQ, a great solution to the Muslim community and to the challenge which was faced then by the people. This is just an example, reflects all types of intelligences which I mentioned. Give you the last example. You remember, those who are also from an Islamic perspective, those who study Islamic history, you will find that Umar ibn al-Khattab, the Caliph of Islam, who was a great leader, in certain period of time, he decided to ask Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was a great general, a military mind in Islam, who made a lot of successful achievements. He decided to ask him to step down. And he was having a great position. And you know, if that one happened later on, like just in the time of the fitna between Umar, Ali, and Muawiyah, you will find a different history of Islam. Yeah, but Khalid bin Walid say, I obey and I step down. And Umar asked him to step down. Both of them did that and answered that in that positive way. Why? Because they have that spiritual intelligence, cultural intelligence, emotional intelligence, and above all this, they understand that they are in a mission to bring Islam. Thank you very much, Prof. Shukran. Sorry for taking some time.
You have enlightened us with many things, and those are our takeaways as well. But if I may say something, Professor Aziz, I gather from you that it is very important for institutions like university to have culturally intelligent leaders. And cultural intelligence must be possessed not only by leaders, but it's also important for universities to nurture, to develop students with cultural intelligence so that they can go out to the society and lead their society, manage their society using cultural intelligence. And you have also told us that cultural intelligence require or refer to our ability to scan, to understand the different culture of people who are working with us, who are serving us, whom we are working with, and use those cultural element or the cultural characteristics to be related or to relate with our work processes. And we use these what we call culturally relevant or culturally related work processes when we deal with our people, with our students, with our workforce and things like that. So it's not only the knowledge and culture, but how do we apply our knowledge of culture when we lead others, when we inspire others. So thank you very much, Professor Aziz. And we will continue with you in another round at the end of this session. So moving on to our second speaker, okay, we are going to listen to another important insight from our panelists. We welcome you, Mr. Aziz Mustafa, to IIUM and to this webinar organized by IIUM and ACAT. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor, pleasure to introduce Mr. Aziz now. Mr. Aziz Mustafa is the head of culture transformation and employee engagement at Celcom Axiata Berhad. Mr. Aziz is an experienced international speaker, having presented keynotes, conducted workshops and talks all around Malaysia and in Singapore, in Indonesia, in Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Australia, Mozambique, South Africa, Belgium, Tajikistan, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. Mr. Aziz is currently the head of culture transformation and employee engagement at Celcom Axiata. He was hired to lead the rejuvenation of the corporate culture, very interesting, at Celcom Axiata as the company embarks on an ambitious plan to expand both locally and regionally. So we can see Axiata signage in other countries outside Malaysia as well nowadays when we travel abroad. Mr. Aziz has a unique mix of corporate, startup, and government leadership experience. He has been a change agent throughout his professional career since 1992. Oh, I can send my students to be your trainee one day, inshallah. Okay, he was an entrepreneur for 10 years, having started up and funded several companies. In 2005, he became an entrepreneur, a salaried employee within a government agency charged with developing the national IT industry, but still pushing the limits as an entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur would be. Okay, his last position at MDEC was head of multilateral and government engagement. As an extension of his work in MDEC, he was recruited to start up a new government agency, which is the Malaysian Innovation Foundation, whereby he was appointed as its chief operating officer. Mr. Aziz was eventually promoted as the CEO of the foundation, which is reporting directly to the Malaysian Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation. He's married with 5 children, is active in social causes, and he enjoys basketball and music. So the screen and time is yours now, Mr. Aziz.
Thank you so much, Professor Shukran. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. All praise and praise be to Allah for by His grace I'm here today. Thank you so much to UIAM for inviting me. It's such an honor to be on the same stage. As a culture practitioner, I'm fascinated by Professor Abdulaziz's work. I wish he would speak longer, but I do realize I'm between the audience and listening to the knowledgeable Imam Faisal all the way from New York. So I'm going to keep my presentation very brief. It's not going to be academic at all, no theories involved. I'll just share a little bit about what I've been working on in Celcom Axiata and how humanizing leadership has impacted or informed my work there. First of all, I'm not very long in Celcom. I joined in early 2019. So when I first joined, and I report to the Chief Human Resource Officer of the group, and he asked me to, Azif, why don't you go out and speak to our people? And I mention this because of Professor Abdulaziz's presentation. We mentioned all of these different intelligences, but I'm most fascinated with emotional intelligence. And I think by having emotional intelligence makes us a bit more human, right? Number one, humanizing leadership is really about realizing and accepting and acknowledging that we are actually leading other human beings. Sometimes in the corporate world, it is easy for us to be caught up by facts and figures and, you know, trying to meet the targets and KPIs. And we forget that the people actually delivering those KPIs and achieving the results that we want are actually human. So my boss, being a very humanizing leader himself, said, Azif, perhaps you should go out throughout the country and meet with our people. So we have at that time about 3,500 employees in every state in the country, in every small town in the country. We have a Celcom, either an outlet or an office. So I took up this offer. I bought a plane ticket and booked hotel rooms throughout the country. And last count, I met over 90% of all employees face-to-face at that time in 2019. Of course, this was BC before COVID. So we still had these very face-to-face type of meetings. And in those meetings, I made it a point really to tell them that the only reason I'm there is to listen. And throughout this journey of over 6 months, I think I've just traveled every single week, 2-3 days a week, to all of these different small towns and met up with the people. And what it had allowed me to do was really have a human connection with them. And this really permitted me to start development of the cultural, let's say, statements or the cultural framework of Celcom, because I was brought in as the culture transformation guy. And obviously they wanted me to transform the existing culture of Celcom into something more efficient, more productive, perhaps would be the word. So when I came back from all of these travels, and one of the things that people ask me is, how have you managed to, you know, get the successes or achievements you've had in the short time that you were in Celcom? And I say the key determining factor is because I inherited a very good CEO. My boss, Dato' Idham Nawawi, is very keen and is very alert about how these human interactions really impact us as a company. And there's no separating between the needs of the organization and the needs of its people. So what happened after that was that we sat down and we worked on what would be the real purpose of our organization. And this is best practice. If you look at all the research, all the top companies in the world have a very strong purpose statement, and this drives engagement with all of their employees because people, humans, want to come to work for something bigger than themselves. You might say they come to work because they want a paycheck, or they come to work because they have to pay the bills, but in actual fact, why people show up and do their best is because they believe in a certain vision and they believe in a purpose of an organization. And all top performing companies have very strong purpose statements. So when we sat down on what should be the new Celcom purpose statement, and I ran workshops throughout the organization, again, another round of traveling throughout the country and through all stages of all levels of the organization. And the three words we eventually settled on after all of these consultations with every level in the organization was advancing our societies. 3 words that encapsulates why Celcom exists. Not to sell SIM cards, not to sell home fiber, Wi-Fi, 5G coming up. Those are the ways and methods that we reach out to people, but the reason and the purpose behind all of that is that we can make an impact and a positive impact on all of the societies that we touch. And we purposely used a very kind of clumsy word, societies, plural of it, because we didn't want to be stuck with we take care of the entire society. That's not our job, right? But every single group that we touch in our day-to-day work is known as a society. So all of these different societies, our job and why we wake up in the morning is to advance them in one way or the other. And that's a very human, very humanizing intention. It's not just to make money. It's just not to make profits purely, but it's really about advancing our societies. And the values that we put in place to support this purpose also were supportive of this more human, more humane type of approach. First of all, we have customer first and learn and innovate, very human endeavor. And respect for individuals is one of our key values. And respect obviously is something that is humanizing us as well as uncompromising integrity, another human factor, as well as exceptional performance. So on top of that, we also have a principle called people at the heart. People. So when the CEO speaks to all employees, he's coming from a place that there's people at the heart of everything we do. And I don't know if anything can be more human than that, because this is where an organization really proves really its worth, right? It proves how it can perform in a way that is respectful, as well as in improving the condition of other people. Now, I'll give you an example of this. When we first started the MCO, the lockdowns, right? This was the government announced on the 18th of March, the country would start lockdowns. But we had actually started sending people home and not sending people home, mandating that everybody work from home on the 17th of March, a day before the government announced it. And how this happened was we had shifted because COVID was such a, it was such a change, in the way we normally do work. We actually enforced the business continuity management protocols, which means that the normal top management didn't make decisions anymore. We convened the BCM, and the BCM chaired by the CEO would then consult and make decisions. I was invited to be part of that BCM, and we would meet every single day, every single morning, chaired by the CEO. So during these meetings, he would always challenge us to say, is this decision in line with our purpose of advancing our societies? Does this decision put people at heart? Does this decision demonstrate that we have customer first? So all of these challenges by the CEO steered us in a way, not just to make decisions based on profit, based on efficiency, based on expediency, but really looking at what is the human impact of these decisions that we're making. And one real example is that when the government or MCMC mandated that all telcos provide 1 free gigabyte of data to all users, right? Free. If you can imagine, this is our bread and butter, right? This is our main product. The government said you must give 1 free GB of data to every single user. And we took that to understand that this is about how we help our customers advance themselves, right? So that they can work from home, so that they can study from home, so that they can do whatever they need with the data. And because we had this mentality, and because Dr. Idham kept pushing us to say, is this in line with our core values? We took the extra step of being proactive about giving people their free 1 GB data. We sent them messages. We told them, don't worry, you don't have to fill out any forms. You don't have to apply for anything. We will proactively give you the free 1 GB data, and we will utilize that 1 free GB data before we touch the data that you paid for. And this was in contrast to the other telcos who took a more business as usual kind of attitude. They said, oh, it's a product. You want this product, fill out this form, go to this link, tick out this box and say, I want this. So people had to actually take different types of actions to get the free GB. Whereas at Celcom, we proactively gave it to them for free. And what happened was there was a consultant that ran a research on how does your telco treat you during the lockdowns, during MCO. It was an international consultancy, and they produced a paper. I can't quote it right now because they haven't really published it yet. But they asked people to rank, how did your telco make you feel during this time? And we were heads and shoulders above any competitor in Malaysia in terms of we made our customers feel important. And I think that is a direct result of us taking a more human approach to this problem. We didn't just transactionally, get people to run through hoops like we would usually do, but because we have a higher purpose, and because our purpose is very humanistic, we took that approach. So Alhamdulillah, I think we have proven that taking a more humanistic approach is actually profitable. And one of the ways a company does this or measures this is, of course, through their performance. How is your profitability? How many customers stayed with you? At telcos, we always measure churn, which means how many people come in and out. We always measure ARPU, how much revenue you get per user. And Alhamdulillah, again, in the last few quarters, Celcom has again outperformed all of our competition. We gained more new customers, we lost fewer customers, we have increased our profitability because some of our competitors are more profitable than us, they're more efficient than us. But on all measures that we track, we've been doing better. And I won't be so brash to say that this is all because of the culture, as Professor Abdulaziz was mentioning about how important culture is. And this is my work, but I won't claim that, but it must have made a difference. It must have made a difference in how the market perceives us, how our customers perceive us, and how potential customers perceive us as being a more humane and more human type of organization compared to our competitors. So again, I really appreciate what Professor Abdulaziz was talking about, all these different types of intelligences. And we use all of those, although probably not so much from an academic perspective, and we don't really do the research on what it is, but in practice, we try as far as possible to utilize all different types of intelligences, especially now since I think at last count, we had 6 different generations working at Celcom today. I'm a Gen X, and the majority of our workers are Gen Ys, and millennials, are going to rule the world very soon, and they're the majority of all workforce around the world. But the Gen Zs are coming on board, and and of course the baby boomers are still on board. So there's all of these different types of personalities in this organization which require different types of intelligences and require different types of communications, because there really are differences in the way different people react differently to the stimuli that provide them. So we're very much aware of that, and we try and provide the types of incentives that that people react to, that motivate people to perform better. We take the approach that everybody is an adult and everybody wants to produce the best that they can, and that's the basic assumption that we have. We also have this approach that the people on the front lines, the people manning our stores and in the regions and everywhere else, are actually the core of this organization, even though the bulk of the numbers of people are at HQ, are in PJ now. HQ is in PJ. But whenever we implement policies and procedures and make up new things, it's all about how would the people on the front line appreciate this, and people in the HQ who are supporting them. Yeah, because the battlefield, as our CEO says, is in the regions. This is where we're fighting the fight. We had to make some changes, obviously, in the way we operate with COVID again. Our workforce currently is split in 4. So there's teams A, B, C, D, and we take turns to go to work in the office. And for 3 weeks, we're at home, and 1 week we're in the office. Starting in December, we'll split into 2 teams, A and B, and we'll rotate that way. So we want to slowly ease people back into the office. Obviously, there's still some fear, and we understand that because we're humans, right? We cannot force people to do things that they don't appreciate. In HR, you will see that in the States, in the US, there's this great resignation going on. More than 4.5 million people have resigned over the past year and a half during COVID. The Malaysian Employers Union said this is not going to happen in Malaysia, but I have my doubts. I think what happens in the Western world usually is a leading indicator of what might happen here. So I think we really need to look at that. The main reason people are resigning en masse is because they have had a taste of what it is like to actually spend more time with their family. What's it like to work at your own home, where I am right now, and be close to your kids, be close to your cats, be close to your in-laws, be close to your garden, and not have to drive an hour and a half to work each way, So when people get a taste of that, they suddenly realize that they are human, right? They suddenly realize that there's more to life than 9 to 5, and suddenly, a lot of people take the decision to quit and do their own thing. And this is where I have the problem with, if you want to look at a theory, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Because right on top, as Professor Abdulaziz was saying, the spiritual need of the human is right on top. And he says it's self-actualization. But the way the hierarchy works is that you must fulfill the bottom needs of physiological needs, safety needs, what else? Self-esteem, before you can actualize yourself, which I think is totally false. Because we've seen people, and in my past work, I used to work in Yayasan Inovasi Malaysia, and for that job, I traveled the country again, and I met people in very small towns, in very small villages, who have attempted daily to achieve their true self, to get self-actualization, even though they didn't have a car or a house or anything, or physical possessions. So I think that theory is debunked. So as an employer, as a company, we must realize that people do have this higher need to achieve self-actualization, to achieve things bigger than themselves. And we as an organization, all we can do really is to provide that avenue for them to achieve that. And hopefully, if we achieve it together as a team, we're stronger together, and we can achieve more as a team. So with that, Prof. Shukran, I will end my presentation right now and be happy to answer questions when they come up later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Azif. Thank you for enlightening us, for sharing with us your practice as organizational change and development specialist. We can see how behavioral sciences, social sciences, human sciences are applied in changing people, in developing organization, also in improving practices, right? So you mentioned about how culture is important, not only to create business, but to create customer delight, right? So I like that much, right? Customer delight that you have achieved, in addition to, I think, loyalty among your customers as well. Right, so thank you very much again. I'll come back to you, Mr. Azif, with some questions after this, maybe from the audience as well. All right, our third speaker this afternoon is Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf. Welcome to IIUM and this webinar, Imam Faisal. On behalf of ACAP and IIUM, we thank you very much for your readiness, your commitment to enlighten your audience this afternoon. Let me introduce you to our audience, Ms. Imam. Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf is the founder and president of Cordoba House, which has a purpose to establish a compassionate, forward-thinking and pluralistic American Muslim identity. He has engaged in outreach to moderates of all faith traditions, engaging in interfaith dialogue and forging connection of trust and mutual support. He is the author of several books on Islam, including most recently, Defining Islamic Statehood, Measuring and Indexing Contemporary Muslim States, and Moving the Mountain, A New Vision of Islam in America. As former Imam of Masjid Al-Farah, a mosque located in Lower Manhattan, he preached a message of understanding between people of all faith traditions. Imam Faisal has served on the Board of Trustees of the Islamic Center of New York, serves as an advisor to the Interfaith Center of New York, and is a member of the World Economic Forum Council of 100 Leaders, Islamic West Dialogue. A leading voice of moderation, Imam Faisal has appeared regularly on the Council on Foreign Relations and the World Economic Forum in Davos. He has been quoted widely in leading media, including BBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, Fox News, New York Times, Washington Post, Frontline, Huffington Post, Daily Beast, and Foreign Policy. Imam Faisal has received numerous awards, including the Search for Common Ground Award for Interfaith Diplomacy in the year 2012 and Ariana Huffington's 2010 Game Changer Award. Time magazine named him among the 100 most influential people of the world in April 2011, and he was listed as one of the top 100 global thinkers of 2010 by Foreign Policy magazine. Imam Faisal was born of Egyptian parentage and educated in England, Egypt, and Malaysia. I had the privilege of meeting your parents, Imam Faisal, when I was interviewing them for our IUM Alumni magazine. Imam Faisal holds a bachelor's degree in Science in Physics from Columbia University in New York and a Master of Science in Plasma Physics from Stevens Institute of Technology in New Jersey. So all floors is yours now, Imam Faisal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have to say shukran to Professor Shukran.
Afwan.
First, let me begin by greeting everybody. Assalamu alaikum to all your audience. And I also want to thank Tan Sri Zul and the administration of IIUM for inviting me to speak at this rather August event. I have a brief confession to make. When I received this invitation, I wasn't sure that I deserved to be invited because I had never heard the expression cultural intelligence. But on researching it, I discovered that this was something I'd been practicing all my life, something which I didn't know had a name to it. So for those of you who may be in my shoes of a couple of weeks ago, cultural intelligence is a term that refers to a person's familiarity with the norms and behaviors of more than one culture. The ability to interpret what might be unfamiliar and ambiguous to people in one culture and to explain it or to actually maneuver himself or herself in a way that people in those cultures would understand. For example, Dr. Farr talked earlier about his sister who was in Japan, who had a stroke. He wanted the request of his friends to have the Japanese military fly her back home in a plane. He sent them an email and he got no response. So instead of being offended, he understood, because he said in Japan, when you get a response, it means a yes. If you don't get a response, that is their way of politely saying that they are unable to accommodate his request. So his, what he called, cultural familiarity is enabled him to behave to understand the unspoken gestures and their meanings. And the science of cultural intelligence has been advanced, I discovered, to quite a nuanced degree. Experts on cultural intelligence have mapped out differences between the culture not only of nations, but of companies, universities, football clubs. We all know that companies have their own distinctive cultures, as our previous speaker, Mr. Azif, had pointed out, how he was responsible for developing the corporate culture of Celcom. I mean, after hearing him talk, I feel like I want to cancel my Maxis subscription and subscribe instead to Celcom. So many of you have heard this term, corporate culture, which refers to the cultural norms in a particular environment. But even within companies, there can be differing subcultures. For example, the sales force typically has a very different culture than that of the engineers. And the public relations people have a very different culture than the lawyers, and very often have no patience with the culture of the legal department. So departments, divisions, professions, geographical regions, communities, cultures Each of these has a constellation of manners, of meanings, of histories, and of values that will confuse the newcomer and cause him or her to make mistakes or to stumble. So unless he or she has what is called in this industry high cultural intelligence, also called CQ or cultural quotient, I don't need to convince you that such a skill is very valuable, because that would be like trying to convince you that learning foreign languages would be helpful if you intend to travel to the countries where these languages are spoken. But I'd like to, at this point, introduce a bit of my story. As was mentioned in my introduction, I was born in Kuwait. My parents were Egyptian. My father was a graduate of Al-Azhar University. And when I was 18 months old, my father went to England. So I grew up 5 years in England. When I was 6 years old, my father was transferred to the Federation of Malaya in February of 1955. I lived in Malaya and then Malaysia for a total of 10 years till the end of 1964. Went back to Egypt and then went to the United States when I was 17 years old. All my life until then, I was, to use this term, cultural intelligence, highly cultural intelligent regarding British culture, regarding Egyptian culture, regarding Malay culture, and then I began to learn American culture, but I didn't know who I was. I longed to feel at home in one cultural environment. In Malaysia, although I was respected and loved by many people, I never felt that I was truly Malay. I was orang asing. I was alien. I was a foreigner. Even when I went back to Egypt, which was my own country, because I'd grown up outside Egypt, my cousins and the young friends would rib me, would say, "You're a khawaga, you are a," which is a kind of an expression where you speak funny, you don't, speak like an Egyptian. So all my life, I felt a foreigner. I felt like I was an outsider. I never felt like I was one of the guys. Not in my own homeland, not in Malaysia, and certainly not in America. It took me until I was around 25 years old to finally decide what my identity would be. I felt I was an amalgam of different cultures. So I had cultural intelligence, but I felt I didn't have a clear identity. Who was I? Who was Faisal? Who was the real Faisal? And I noticed that every few years, many things about me would change. My physical appearance would change. My emotional attachments would change. My ambitions would change. My ideas and thoughts would change. And yet I felt this absolute conviction that I was the same individual. So I asked myself, why do I still say that I'm the same person, I'm the same Faisal, when by every measurable metric, everything that is measurable, which is my appearance, my thoughts, my ambitions, my emotions, my loves, have been changing, have evolved? Why do I say I'm the same? So after a lot of thinking, I decided to redefine who I was. And I limited my identity to what I called my spiritual identity, which I called the timeless self, my timeless I with a capital I. When I narrowed myself to that definition, I felt more comfortable, because then I could adapt and adopt any different culture, or even another culture, without feeling that it was it was like whether I wear batik or whether I wear a suit and a tie, or whether I wear whatever, baju Melayu, whatever, I'm still the same person. But these cultures were like clothing that I would wear. And later on, as I refined this, I defined my timeless self as the breath of God within me. The Quran tells us that Allah created us by breathing into our corpus, into our body, from His ruh. وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. I breathed into Him, I blew into Him from my spirit. And therefore, that is what gave my timeless I its timelessness. And therefore, I believe that every human being at his or her essence shares this identity, shares this divine spark within them, a divine component to their identity, which makes us semi-eternal, which makes the soul indestructible. So whereas my body, my thoughts, my ideas, my emotions will evolve and change and eventually die and cease to exist, my soul will continue to survive. The soul is indestructible because Allah is indestructible, and because the soul is a breath of the eternal. I came to Malaysia in 1955. Over the years, I have felt, I went, of course, like everybody, went to a school, the public schools. The public schools at that time were teaching in English. And the student body reflected the population of Malaysia. We were Malays, we were Chinese, we were Indians, a sprinkling of the couple of foreigners whose parents were teaching at the University of Malaya. And that was a student body. So we grew up and developed friendships across the racial divisions. Now, fast forward after a couple of decades, in fact, maybe within a decade after my departure from Malaysia, Malaysia's schools began to balkanize. And you had Chinese schools, Malay schools, Indian schools, and now also international schools. So what has happened is that the more recent generations of Malaysians are not as linked as they were before. And yet, as the long-term Malaysian politician Lim Kit Siang has said, Malaysia is a confluence of 4 civilizations. But because we're talking and using the term cultural intelligence, I will edit his term to say Malaysia is a confluence of 4 cultures: the Malay culture, the Chinese culture, the Indian culture, and the Western culture. Now, if we were to measure the cultural quotient, that is a cultural intelligence of Malaysians across these cultural differences that comprise their own society as Malaysians, I believe that the cultural quotient of most Malaysians is much lower than it should be. In other words, it can be much higher, very much higher. So in my talk today, the rest of my talk, I would like to take the rest of my time to propose a cultural intelligence project for some of you here, the IIUM staff and students. And I particularly would like to engage people like Dr. Far Kim Beng and Professor Faiza, who is an expert in languages, to be part of this. Now, when we unpack the defining components of a community's culture, what do we find? We can find, most of all, most important, religion. the celebrations of religious festivals. But secondly, the non-religious cultural beliefs or cultural festivals, like in Germany where they have Oktoberfest, where the Germans just go and drink endless amounts of beer. And even Christmas today in most parts of the world is celebrated more as a cultural practice than as a religious one. And we have, thirdly, political beliefs and political celebrations like Merdeka Day and Malaysia Day in Malaysia. Fourth, we have language. Fifth, we have mode of dress. And sixth, we have foods and beverage that we drink at certain times of, what we do. Now, as you can see from observing this list, some of these items are easier to cross into and to adapt or adopt than others. For example, we all eat and enjoy the foods of others without hesitation, as long as it abides by the religious dietary laws. Growing up in Malaysia, I didn't know what sushi was. I didn't know what many foods of the world were. But today, we decide we want to eat Chinese, we want to eat Japanese, we want to eat Malay food, you want to eat, mamak food, whatever you call it. And as I look at societies and how they've evolved, looking, say, Malaysia over the past 65 years of my observation, Malaysians have increasingly adopted Western clothing, something which is true actually in most of the world today. When I first came to Malaya in 1955, you would hardly ever see a Malay gentleman praying at a mosque in a shirt and trousers. Every Friday, you would see the Malays coming from their offices, wearing shirts and trousers, carrying under their arms their sarongs and bajus Melayu. At the masjid, they would change into their sarong and baju Melayu, perform their Jum'ah prayers, then change back to their shirts and trousers, go back to their offices for the afternoon work shift. Today, you'll see young Malay men performing Friday prayers at the mosque, wearing cargo pants and t-shirts that sport the logos of their favorite football club and wearing baseball hats in reverse. Malay women, however, are most they are the most more resistant to sartorial change. I find it a very notable observation that Malay women, even when fully covered in baju kurung and wearing a tudung, cannot bring themselves to pray unless they wear the telukong on top of whatever they are wearing, which I find very interesting. This is, again, a cultural thing. Going back to the above list of identifiers of particular culture, we note that the hardest to penetrate and cross into are those of religion and those of language. So, and based upon my work in New York City and interfaith engagement with other faith traditions, my proposal today narrows into how IIUM can embark on an experimental project that would express their leadership in enhancing Malaysian cultural intelligence in these two areas of religion and language. Since that would have the most impact in enabling the Malaysian population to be culturally, to raise their cultural quotient within the Malaysian context. Why is this important to leadership? Because leadership at its best is about a couple of things. First of all, is about leading a community, whatever that group is, into the future, towards a better future. And coordinating and focusing their energies so that they collectively become the best that they can be, and to guide them and take them along that journey. One of my favorite expressions is that of Imam Ali, who said, educate your children for a time that will be different from your own. So going back to the project, people's highest values are typically their religious values, because that is what they believe in most deeply. So by becoming increasingly aware or informed in the religious dimension, a skill that we may call religious awareness or religious intelligence, we become more qualified to lead our multiracial, multi-religious nation in a way that increases their happiness and sense of personal fulfillment. So how do we do this? I propose that we should learn the religions of our compatriots and their vocabularies and their languages. In the case of Malaysia, I believe all Malaysians should learn not only about Islam, but about Christianity, Western culture, the prime religion Western culture, about Buddhism, about Taoism, which are the major faiths of the Chinese global population, and Hinduism, which is that of the Indian population in Malaysia. And all Malaysians should be able to converse in Malay, Chinese, I don't know whether you want to Mandarin or Cantonese or Hokkien, that can be refined, Tamil or Hindi, and certainly in English, because English has become now the world, the lingua franca of the world. You cannot do any advanced studies in engineering, in medicine, even in diplomacy, without a fantastic command of the English language. With regard to languages, I'm not a language expert, but I'm told that apart from understanding the basic grammatical structure of a language, a vocabulary of just 100 to 200 words allows a person to converse, in the marketplace and to do street type conversation. And I believe that this idea of knowing each other, speaking each other's languages, and learning each other's religions is something that Quran itself commands us to do. So the rest of my presentation, I'll focus on what I call the Quranic imperative towards these ideas. The big story of the Quran, or the overarching story of the Quran and the Prophet's mission, is that it was about establishing a religion that was Allah's version of an interfaith religion. Now, the mission of the Prophet was to reveal a version of Dinillah, what the Quran calls God's religion, or Din al-Haq, or the true religion, authentic religion, Din al-Qayyimah, or Din al-Qayyim, the valuable religion, which Allah revealed, as He says in the Quran, to all communities all over the world. So it was, in effect, a summation of all previous revelations, and therefore it would be suitable for all times, all places, and all cultural contexts. The Quran, this is why the Quran specifically and explicitly validates earlier revelations, commands the followers of the Quran to believe in them, while at the same time correcting flagrant errors that crept into some of the beliefs of those who subscribe to these previous revelations, so that the followers of the Quran subsequently would refrain and rein themselves from committing similar errors, although they continued to commit those same errors. And the flip side of this objective, or the corollary of this objective, was to create a community of believers, of mu'minun, who would share a common platform of faith from the faith that existed in that region. Now, what is the Quranic basis for these points? One is verse 136 from Surah An-Nisa, where Allah commands us, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, aminu billahi wa rasulih, wal kitab alladhi nazzala ala rasulih, wal kitab alladhi anzala min qabl, wa man yakfur billahi wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi wa rusulih wal yawm al-akhir faqad dhalla dhalalan ba'ida. Which means in English, O you who have believed, believe in God and in His messenger, in the book He sent down upon His messenger, and in the book which He sent down before. How many of us believe in that or even read it? Whoso believes in God and his angels and his books and his messengers in the plural and the last day, whoever disbelieves in all of these has surely gone astray into dalalan ba'ida, into a very far error, not only error, major, very distant error. I'll repeat this point this time in Malay. Wahai orang-orang yang beriman, tetaplah beriman kepada Allah dan Rasulnya dan kepada kitab yang Allah turunkan kepada Rasulnya dan kitab yang Allah turunkan sebelumnya. How many of us believe in the kitab yang Allah turunkan sebelum Rasulullah? Barang siapa yang kafir kepada Allah, kepada malaikat-malaikatnya, kepada kitab-kitabnya, kepada rasul-rasulnya, dan kepada hari kemudian, maka sesungguhnya orang itu telah sesat sejauh-jauhnya. This means we have to believe in all of the scriptures that Allah revealed. The Quran mentions the Torah, it mentions the Injil, the Evangel, mentions the Psalms, the Zabur of Dawood. The Quran does not mention other scriptures like the Tao Te Ching and the Upanishads by name, but since the Quran tells us explicitly that Allah sent messengers to all communities, we must certainly accept that he would not have omitted China and India. So we must include these scriptures and their messengers as part of the total heritage of Allah's revelations to humankind. Another key verse is verse 64 of Ali Imran, the third surah, where Allah says, قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالَوْا إِلَى كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ أَلَّا نَعْبُدُ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَلَا نُشْرِكَ بِهِ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَتَّخِذَ بَعْضُنَا بَعْضًا أَرْبَابًا مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ فَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَقُولُوا اشْهَدُوا بِأَنَّا مُسْلِمُونَ. Which means say, so it's a command to Allah commands the Muslims, the Prophet and by extension the Muslims. O people of the book, let us come now to a common word between us and you. Kalimatun sawa, I'd interpret better as a common platform between us and you. A common platform of faith, that we serve none but God, that we associate none with him, and that some of us should not take others as gods apart from God, or as lords, arbab, of Rabb. And if they turn their backs, then you say, bear witness that we are submitted, means we are Muslimun. And in Malay, to repeat the point, katakanlah. So this is a commandment. This is not a suggestion. It is a commandment that Allah is making to the Muslims. Hai, wahai ahlul kitab, marilah kepada suatu kalimat yang tetap di antara kami. Dan tidak ada perselisihan antara kami dan kamu. Bahawa tidak kita sembah kecuali Allah. Dan tidak kita bersekutukan dia dengan sesuatu pun yang tidak sebahagian kita menjadikan sebahagian yang lain sebagai Tuhan selain daripada Allah. Dan jika mereka berpaling, maka katakanlah kepada mereka, saksikanlah bahawa kami adalah orang-orang yang berserah diri. Now this commandment is buttressed by the Quranic verse 13 of Surah Al-Hujurat, verse Surah 49, which is quoted by Dr. Mustafa Barghouth as well. Allah informs us, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. O people, we surely created you from one male and one female, and fashioned you into nations and tribes so that you would get to know each other, so that you would celebrate your variety. But this idea of getting to know each other is the purpose for which God created us. All right? So, hai manusia, sesungguhnya kami menciptakan kamu dari seorang laki dan seorang perempuan dan menjadikan kamu berbangsa-bangsa dan bersuku-suku supaya kamu saling kenal mengenal. Tapi mana di Malaysia, orang Malaysia saling kenal mengenal? This is my critique. We love each other's foods maybe, but we have become more balkanized. So this is a violation of this Quranic commandment. So therefore, how do we do this? We have to get to know each other across our ethnic, our racial, and our cultural varieties. So when you combine these two commandments from Allah, the Quran is commanding us to embrace our diversity, to get to know each other across our racial and cultural differences, and to find a common platform that unites us. Our Muslim predecessors extended this understanding of who the Ahl Kitab were towards members of the other faith communities they interacted with, such as the Hindus in India and the Buddhists in Central and South Asia, regarding them as communities to whom Allah also sent revelations. So this is what I believe has to be done by a group within IIUM to take leadership on this issue within Malaysia. So the project that I propose is to have an experimental group, a dozen people maybe at most, maybe more, it doesn't matter, who work to develop this common platform. Now, I have worked on this to some extent. A common platform of faiths. What are its components? The first of all is the creator. Every religion has a concept of a creator. But in Islam, our concept of God involves two aspects to it. One which these scholars have called tashbih, which means Allah resembles. Allah is Rahman, Rahim, Wadud, Adil, Allah is merciful, compassionate. Allah is Al-Jamil. Allah is Al-Haq, the real. These are all things that He's Alim, He's knowledgeable, He's seeing, He's hearing. These are things that are called tashbih because we understand Him, that resembles us. But then there's also a concept of tanzih, which is called tanzih. Allah is munazzah. In Allah is beyond comparison. That Allah in His fullness cannot be known. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ وَلَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. Nothing is separate to Allah. Now, not all religions have both of these aspects, but every religion emphasizes the tanzih of God. Every religion has an understanding of the Creator as beyond comparability. So this is one aspect of a common platform. All religions can agree on a concept of an absolute God, a Creator who is beyond our ability to understand, a belief in what we call the transcendent nature of God. And as examples of statements from each of these religious traditions, Imam al-Ghazali, for example, said, Allah is the absolute being that transcends all that can be apprehended by sight or by insight. The Christian mystic, Meister Eckhart, said, God is what has no resemblance. The Katha Upanishad of the Hindus asserts that God is beyond name and beyond form, beyond the senses, inexhaustible, without beginning, without end, beyond time, beyond space, beyond causality, eternal and immutable. No Muslim has a problem with that. In a Buddhist text, we read that nirvana, which is the Buddhist experience of the sacred, is unborn, unbecome, unmade, unfabricated. So that is one basis, a strong basis of a common platform of faith among the faith traditions in Malaysia. The second aspect, that all human faiths also express a demand from the Creator to humanity that we acknowledge the Creator and to live in a way that merits His approval. And towards this end, all religions teach us to do good, to love for each other what we love for ourselves. This has been called the golden rule. It is sometimes expressed positively, which means you treat others the way you would like to be treated, and sometimes in the opposite way, as commanding us not to treat others the way we would not want to be treated. All religions teach us that murder, theft, libel, adultery are crimes. All religions teach us to be truthful, honest, and just in our dealings. All religions teach us that excessive greed, lust, pride, and arrogance are human weaknesses and failings. All religions teach us that moderation in our appetites, in our worship, and our dealings constitute the perfection of human behavior. This set of beliefs, brothers and sisters, constitute the common set of fundamental beliefs and attitudes shared by the major faiths of the world that can, and in fact, establish the basis of a common platform between the faiths, what the Quran calls kalamatin sawa bainana. There's no reason that this cannot be a foundational aspect of a common denominator towards Malaysia's religious communities. And if Professor Faiza is willing to create a program so I can learn 100 to 200 words of Mandarin, of Cantonese, of Tamil and Hindi, and we will have made a significant and meaningful advance towards what our Prime Minister today has called Keluarga Malaysia, the Malaysian family of peoples in the plural. So this is a project that I propose for the IIUM staff, alumni, and people that I mentioned, including Professor Dr. Faiza and Dr. Far Kim Beng, to be participants in and to help us lead such a project as a contribution that will make IIUM take a big step toward establishing its leadership in creating Keluarga Malaysia. So with that, I thank you for the time taken and your patience with me, and wish you all Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih, Imam Faisal.
Kembali. Sama-sama.
Thank you very much again to you, and thank you for enlightening us, for sharing with us your view, your knowledge, for giving us the insight, for giving us the suggestion, also the critique, and I think it is also a commandment for us to really, I think, accomplish our mission, whereby one of our 7 missions talk about the need to do interfaith dialogue, right? And I think our current trust are also focusing on culture of Iqra. So, I mean, your suggestion for us to embark on that research really befits our culture of Iqra, whereby in any intervention that we want to design and implement, it has to be informed by data, by information. And your suggestion on your project will actually help us to identify cultural elements or cultural disconnect, whatever we are going to find out. And so that we can really function here as an institution which has been mandated to nurture, harmonious life among people on this earth, inshallah. So, ladies and gentlemen, that wrap up the 3 great panelists' insights sharing. I would like to now open the screen or floor to audience. Should you have any questions to ask or view to share with the 3 panelists? Do you have any questions?
Can I begin?
Please, Tan Sri.
Assalamualaikum, Imam.
How are you? Tan Sri.
MashaAllah. I never knew that you are so close. Let's do your next door,
I am. I'm right here. In fact, I'd like to have dinner with you soon.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I mean, it's amazing. You really bring back the memories of the younger days. Talking about Malaysian before the balkanization, I really relate to that. Although I went to what you call the Malay College Kuala Kangsar, which is a Malay sort of a school, but all our teachers are non-Malays and non-Muslims, and we get exposed to to the variety of people that you were talking about. And I really like your project. In fact, I've started already lobbying, and we are having the project being formed now. Hopefully, before we close tomorrow, we can announce that the project is on as well. So we'll make sure that will happen, inshallah. Thanks for that suggestion. I would just want to relate, when I'm in Al-Bukhari University, you were there, and that was what? That was still in the 2013 thereabout. Yeah, the issue of orang pakai baju Melayu dan kain sarung sembahyang is still being enforced. You remember the story is a very awkward one. We have got 300 students in Al-Bukhari University from 50 or 80 nations, I think, at that time. It was quite a mixed group. And they when they go for Jum'ah, the Imam stipulate that they must come in a baju Melayu and kain sarung.
Yeah, okay. It reminds me of I was invited to go to Umrah 1 year by a Malaysian friend whom I won't mention his name right now, but he brought a group of his friends with him, invited me to come along.
Yeah.
So one of the participants, when we were in Mecca, of course, we'd go to pray in the Haram, in front of the Kaaba. So one of these guys, who was a Malay from Terengganu, one day came with his baju Melayu and his pants in red, but a red one.
Inviting trouble, huh?
After the Salah, there was a Saudi man who practically vented into him with such passion. He said, how can you dress like this and come to pray in this color? He was absolutely inflamed with passion beyond. It was a difficult thing to calm him down, and we had to almost practice. He wasn't violent or anything, but he was very, very passionate. So these are the things about cultural differences, and this is why the ulama actually of fiqh have said that ada, or like adat, what we call it in Malay, is legal. It's shara'i, it's one of the sources of Islamic law when it doesn't violate the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet, because these cultural norms they have almost the power of law. It's the practice, it's the Sunnah of a people, Sunnah in the sense of the tradition.
Yes.
Yeah.
In this case, Al-Bukhari, the guy was praying exactly like the baseball hat turned the other way around, And
right.
When he was praying, the Imam came and took the hat and threw it on the floor while he was still praying.
I believe it. Professor Kamal Hassan. Professor Kamal Hassan was reading us a story when he went to Bangladesh once, I think, and he went to a masjid over there. And I don't remember whether he had his head covered or not, but there was this guy who came, and while he was praying, either put something on his head or adjusted something on his head and kept doing it as long while he was praying.
A more serious one, if I can share. I think some of the students then do not go to the masjid, and I ask them why. It says that the tajweed of the Imam is not right. So they say we cannot go into a mosque where the Imam is not reading the Quranic verse well. So they refuse to go. So these are issues which I think it is undercurrent. But when you talk about cultural intelligence, this may be important for us to remember, because these are maybe a minority, but it makes a significant impact as far as behavior is concerned. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Hey, but don't exclude me from your research group, huh?
Yeah. Yes, I think.
Don't exclude me.
Okay, sponsor.
I want to be a member of your research group.
Okay, maybe the subject. I think you're better as a subject than a member. All right, thank you very much, Imam. Assalamualaikum.
My pleasure.
yeah, I think that project is something that we have to do, something that we have to shoulder as well, Tan Sri. I will also communicate this with our friends in Department of Comparative Religion because they have subject matter experts who look at these issues as well. I think if Dr. Amila is here, she can respond to the idea. And I must now invite Dr. Pa Kim Beng, who has been mentioned by Imam Faisal, and he himself would like to ask questions, I believe. Dr. Pa Kim Beng?
Yeah. Can everyone hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Imam Faisal, I have attended your Cordoba initiative in Shangri-La Hotel maybe some 15 years ago in Kuala Lumpur, if you may recall.
I've been here since 2000. I mean, in Kuala Lumpur, when we approached then Prime Minister Tun Abdullah Badawi, and he supported our initiative then, and we established. But that was in 2006.
2006. Okay. So first of all, I would like to congratulate you that you went very deep into explaining yourself, and I can still feel your nerve coming from the webcam. So I think you are changing for the better. You are not just aging, but you are changing for the better. So that's a good sign.
Coming from you, that's high praise.
Yeah. Now, on the issue of cultural intelligence, this is my view as a political scientist and also as a mualaf. These days, I do not call myself a Muslim because I am a Muslim, but there are a lot of Muslims out there, and I'm not referring to Muslims in Malaysia alone, but Muslims out there who do not know that their misrepresentation of their conduct can actually affect the image of Islam. For example, let's take the case of my mother's reversion to Islam, because we are all born Muslims. My mother loves me the most, but it took me 34 years of exemplary behavior from the day I entered International Islamic University. In fact, I came so close to being kicked out of Islamic University or not accepted at all, because IRKH, the Islamic Review Knowledge Kuliah, was afraid that a non-Muslim, they didn't know that I had been studying Islam on my own for 2.5 years secretly. So when they saw my name, Pa Kim Beng, they thought that if we admit this person into RRKH, what if he writes a letter to the Star or to the Straits Times saying that we are brainwashing him to be a Muslim? Then all the hard work that had been done by IIU or UIA, by the late Professor Malik Faisal or Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman would have gone to waste. So I received a rejection letter first, strictly because I was judged on my name. But then Abu Bakr was Abu Bakr after and he became a Muslim. Omar was Omar after and before he became a Muslim. It was on the 30 hours before my mother passed away this year that I realized that in Malaysia, the Malays are not as rigid or conservative as we assume. because when the Ustad came to my apartment to take the Shahada of my mother for the second time, I asked the Ustad, I have already represented my mother and she cannot speak. Is it necessary for her to speak? Because she's a dhimmi, she doesn't speak English or Bahasa. So the Ustad said, you can represent her, it's fine. So I represented my mother and I said the Shahada for the second time. And I also said my Shahada for the second time. In fact, there is actually a very unique story to how I became a Muslim. When I was in my Form 6, I was introduced to Sejarah Islam. And I studied Sejarah Islam on my own. And then based on some minimal interaction with my Malay friends, 2 Malay friends, one was able to explain Islam in a very beautiful manner. And I was completely fascinated. And it makes sense, just one God. And in Taoism, as you mentioned, Chinese do not really mind if there are more and more gods that we can embrace and celebrate. We really do not mind. In fact, Malays in Malaysia do not realize that the small little temples that are located just before the buildings are being built up, they are known as Natokong. And that particular small shrine is actually a celebration or a mark of respect for the jinn. So the pork should not be there. The alcohol should not be there. So unknown to the Malays, the earlier Chinese 300 or 400 years ago had already respected Islam in their own indigenous and localized format. And this is very peculiar because all contractors in Malaysia, if they do not have that little shrine built up first, the likelihood of accidents and the building collapsing or the tractors not moving are almost 100%. So in other words, we are so near yet so far in terms of understanding each other. However, if the Muslims understand what I just said and start knocking down the shrines, then we are in trouble. Because it is considered a Chinese version of bid'ah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have to approach cultural intelligence in a very sophisticated manner. There are certain things that we can say, there are certain things that we still cannot say.
Well, that is why I suggest that you have to be part of this group, because it's a research group that will map out, which will map out the cultural differences, the religious differences, the beliefs. You have to do a mapping first, and before you can. I mean, Piaget's theory of cognitive development, which I studied in my younger days, where he talks about how the children begin to the stages of development of language. First, you learn the words, the sounds and the words. Then you learn phrases. Then you learn how to articulate yourself. And finally, you learn to be creative.
Yeah.
And I actually wrote a paper which applied Piaget's theory of cognitive development into different subject areas. In every subject, whether it's mathematics, whether it's religion and theology, there is also an equivalent 4-stage development in one's ability. So you can begin by, you have to know the vocabulary of mathematics. You have to know the equations, the theorems, until finally you are able, if you are gifted enough, to be creative and to create or discover new theorems in mathematics. The same thing in religion as well. So we have to do a mapping first, what we call in America a mapping, so that before you cannot be, because the term cultural intelligence is a little bit of a misnomer, because it's not really your intellectual intelligence, it's a familiarity. I mean, you can have an IQ of 150, but if I didn't know that the Japanese will not respond to me if I ask for a military plane to fly my mother or my sister out of Tokyo to Kuala Lumpur, I would have taken offense at not getting an answer or something very important. So we all have stories of cultural dissonance when people have that. So it's really an understanding and a sensitivity, because we have to be extra sensitive, especially when we're dealing with things that people regard with great passion. You cannot barge in with army boots into areas which are very, very sensitive to people. You have to be very, very, very refined and very genteel and very sensitive and respectful of people's differences. And even the Quran tells us, do not curse the gods of those who do not believe in Allah, because then they will curse Allah out of their ignorance.
Sure.
You see, so the need to be sensitive to people's beliefs and to find correspondences, because as you said, we believe in jinns. Muslims have a belief in jinns.
Yes.
And I'm sure that other religious traditions believe in them too.
Yes.
Different kinds of spirits.
Yes.
So anyhow, before I go any further, Doctor, I'll please ask authorities, I would like to know how to be in touch with Dr. Farr.
Oh,
His
I will
email,
give you
phone
my
number.
email. Sure. I'll give you my email. I should add on behalf, with your kind indulgence, Imam Faisal. Imam Faisal was considered a very controversial figure in the United States because he was the first to suggest the erection of a small mosque near Ground Zero, if I'm not mistaken. Ground Zero is known as 911.
Yes.
And because of that little gesture, he entered the notoriety of American history.
Yes. Can I convey one question, Imam Faisal?
Sure.
So I have a question, 3 or 4 questions here from our viewers on YouTube. I think this is a question from Professor Sohaimi. I'm reading his question. Sheikh Imam Faisal, we Malay Muslims in Malaysia still believe Malays are superior, or Tuan Tanah, he call it, who are unable to accept others as leaders. What is a suggestion to Malay Muslims to get rid of these feelings?
Well, I mean, I grew up with people from with different races, and I discovered that there were people who were brilliant in all races, in all cultures. And in many cases, if people are given a similar training and a similar education, then, if there was a level ground, then people would advance as far as they can go to. Look, the Malays, there are certain stereotypes or certain beliefs that we believe people have, like, the Germans tend to be very disciplined. The Mediterranean people tend to be very emotional. Now, the Malays, my friend Tun Hamid, the previous Chief Justice of Malaysia, had informed me that the Malays are a very communal people. They tend to give greater credence to the community and to what he called the community mind rather than to the individual. Whereas in American culture, for example, Americans are very individualistic. Everybody wants to shine, far more competitive. Whereas Malays tend to be very communal and focus on the community mind. So we can identify certain cultural traits like this, and these traits can be either positive or negative depending on the context. So we observe, and I mean, there is a reality that we have to recognize. Throughout my history in my lifetime in Malaysia, the Chinese have always been extremely hardworking, and they have always had. They have always, as we call it in America, punched way above their weight economically, to the point that they own the biggest chunk of the Malaysian economy. And things that we read today, even about the NEP, which happened after 1969, which Tun Razak, the second prime minister, established, because he recognizes we need to create some kind of equity, some kind of affirmative action, so that the Malay component of Malaysia's community has a reasonable share of the economy.
All right.
Today, the Malays still do not have a share of the economy that is commensurate with their population. So if this is not addressed in a way that the Malays will feel comfortable with, there will be racial friction.
All right.
Now, there's always a certain amount of friction between different communities, but we have to minimize it, and we have to communicate it. So we understand that the Malays are the Bumiputras, together with the native people, and as such, they have a feeling, an understandable feeling, that they also have to lead the country. So we accept that, and we understand that. So what has happened is that there's been an unspoken social contract in Malaysia. Between the Malays and the Chinese. The Malays will have the majority of the political power, and we recognize that you Chinese, whether we want it or not, you're going to have the majority of the financial economic power. So this has been the counterposing forces in Malaysia. Now, we all know, the Malays themselves know, the Chinese know, if there was a level playing ground in Malaysia, the Chinese would take over. Like what happened in Singapore.
Yes.
Or even in Penang. I remember my late mother in the 1980s, she told me, if the Malays aren't careful, they'll lose Penang the way they'll lose Malaysia. They'll lose Singapore. A friend of mine a few years ago said, oh, we've already lost Penang. So the point is that maybe it is sensitive to speak about these issues, but it's important to air them out in spaces where they can be discussed and aired, and a solution worked out. Otherwise, these things will fester. These things will fester under the surface, and then when they explode, they'll explode in uncontrollable ways.
All right.
So we have to anticipate this and find a way to get the leaders to discuss it and come up with solutions that are workable and will not lead to social eruptions.
All right. So meaning to say, I mean, in understanding or in doing cultural intelligence, you need to be sensitive to the context as well. So in this relation, yes, in this relation, there's a question to Professor Aziz. Professor Aziz, a question for you. As a scholar, how can cultural intelligence help us in dealing with sensitive issues related to religion?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Shukran. I think this is a very important question. Just a minute. I got to. Prof. Shukran, thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think if we go back to the teachings of Islam and you go to Sirah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, you will find really a wealth of approaches how you deal with these situations. I give you example from the Quran. Even in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about Fir'aun, when he told Musa to go to Musa and Harun to go to Fir'aun. We know that Fir'aun is an oppressor. We know that Fir'aun is an aggressor, and he colonized and he took the rights of Banu Israel. But the Quran, because Islam is rahmatan lil alameen, the Quran tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned to Musa, قَالَ اذْهَبَا إِلَى فِرْعَوْنَ إِنَّهُ طَغَى. Go to Fir'aun. He is an oppressor. He is claiming that he is a Rabb. He is Fir'aun. وَقُولَ لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. And tell him a kind word. He might, even though we know that he is an oppressor, we know that he is this and that, but that's the style of the Quran, and that approach of the Quran runs all through the vein of the whole Quran, and that's what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has practiced. When he dealt with the Jew, he dealt with the Sabi'a, he dealt with the Arabs of all type of, you will see the emotional intelligence, you will see the cultural intelligence, you will see that Rasulullah is a leader who observes what you are talking about now, the sensitivities. When he deals with different tribes of Quraysh, each tribe, he deals with that tribe in a different style, in a different approach, in a different way. I give you an example. When the delegation came from Yemen, and they were Christian delegation, and he's trying to convey to them the religion, and he told the leader of the delegation, come and stay close to me. Come, stay close to me. And please let me know what is it that you want and how, you know, these things shows that the Prophet ﷺ takes care of all this cultural, religious, you know. I give you the last example just to understand. When he went to Ta'if and he was beaten in Ta'if, and his tooth was broken and so on and so forth, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Jibreel. And Jibreel came and he told Prophet Muhammad that the Malakul Jibal, the angel of mountains, is with me here, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking your permission for this angel to demolish them, to destroy all this. You know what was the Prophet's answer? He said, no, 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 no. I don't want. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring from their own children and generation a new leaders for the world, a new leaders for Islam. So this is the extent of emotional, spiritual and cultural. That's why I say spiritual intelligence in Islam must be linked with cultural and emotional. Then you see the beauty of the Islamic approach. Of course, nowadays we need to do a lot to bring back this practice, to bring back this understanding of the religion. But its seerah of Rasul is full of humanity, of rahmah, of mercy. But as I think one of the speakers mentioned, I think even Prof himself, Kim, this morning, that there is always that dichotomy between what the practice, what you believe, what you know, and the practice. So that need to be fixed, so that we reflect the, you know, a huge number of examples are there at all levels, from parenting to dealing with non-Muslim, to leadership, to strategies of war, to family, to society, to economy, to citizenship. You know, the last example, Prophet Shukran, Rasulullah, when he went for Hajj, in one of the Hajj, and he was teaching the Ummah the ahkam of Hajj. You know, there was a hadith says, "Ma khuyyira Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam." Rasul, whenever Rasul is asked by any person, any Sahaba, about doing something, he always goes to the easy one. Please do. It's halal. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. But nowadays, you will find some of our people, which the Quran, the Rasul in one of the hadith says, half faqih, half muta'allim, half. Everything is complicated. But in the style of Rasul, whatever, go ahead. As long as you don't go against the core of Tawheed and Sharia, everyththing is permissible. So that's the style, that's the approach which creates cultural intelligence, which creates acculturation. That's, I think, my comment on this question.
Aziz, thank you for the elaboration. One last question to Mr. Aziz. There's a question here. What are the impacts of the level of cultural intelligence competencies on performance, on organization performance? Yes.
Very good. Thank you, Prof. Just as an aside, before I go there, one of what I wanted to add to the discussion that Dr. Parr and Imam Faisal was having is that in our organization now in Axiata, we're starting to address cultural biases and unconscious biases even. So one of our companies are already starting to remove pictures from CVs. So when we evaluate CVs, we don't look at gender, we don't look at race, we don't look at face. Because kadang-kadang when you see a beautiful face, sometimes you have different perceptions. So we wanted to remove those biases, and one of the ways was removing pictures from profiles and from CVs. So just wanted to throw that in. So in terms of cultural competencies, I mean, we don't label them as such, but we realize that the better a person is at relating to other human beings in the team, the better the performance they can get from themselves and from the team around them. So what we do is try and incentivize leaders who are more humane in that sense, leaders who are able to nurture their team members and build them up. Before, I guess it doesn't happen anymore, but not too long ago, it was actually quite normal to see leaders shout and yell and throw files and all of this, have tantrums, right? Of course, this is no longer acceptable in the modern workplace. And we even, up to the extent of training people to have difficult conversations. We train all of our leaders to tell stories even, because storytelling is a key ability of human beings to convey information in a way that other human beings can adapt, can relate to, and thus have a better chance of them taking better action again with that information. So I guess the types of competencies that we're looking at right now is quite different from what it used to be. We understand that people who rise up in organizations tend to be very competitive, highly hyper-competitive even, and hyper-competitive people tend to have quite brash personalities. However, because of that understanding, we also try and make people relate to the types of values that we have. And as I mentioned before, one of our core values is respect for individuals. And respect had to be explained quite explicitly. One of the things that I did in this tour I did around the country was even have to do role-playing games with all the employees to say, this is showing respect, this is not. And some of the things that are not respectful are things that we take for granted. We speak in a different language in the lift. The Chinese will speak Chinese, the Malay will speak Malay, Indian will speak Indian, where there's other people around you in the lift not knowing what the conversation is about. And we had to explain to people, this is actually disrespectful. And when you say to somebody that, excuse me, you promised to deliver this piece of work today and you're not delivering it, that is actually respectful, because you want your team member to perform to the best of their abilities. And to be respectful is not to talk to them behind their backs, and which is quite typical in our society. So we had to train people, go to their face and say respectfully, demand them to perform at their best. So these are the type of competencies that are quite recent that we're having to retrain our people with.
Thank you, Mr. Aziz. Thank you very much. Dr. Park Kim Bang, you have one question or you have something to add? Yeah, please.
just one question, Mr. Azif. I don't mean to be cheeky, but based on what I read in the Quran, it says that men are entitled to one look of a woman, but then that person has to look down. So am I right? Because I'm not well versed in the Quran, so I think the picture should still be there. Your HR manager just shouldn't stare at the picture.
So this necessitates another study, maybe.
I think a new research group will be.
Yes.
Sri may ask you to lead this one, Doc.
Yeah.
Thank you for the comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fakim Beg, for raising that question. Mr. Azif, Imam Faizal, Professor Aziz, thank you very much for enlightening us, for sharing your knowledge with us, for invigorating us as well. Thank you so much. We learned a lot. Thank you also to the audience who have asked questions, who have benefited from this sharing this afternoon. So I would like to thank the organizer for trusting me in moderating the session. I am now passing this back over to my brother, Dr. Adli.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Shukran, for moderating the second forum for today. I'm sure all those who participated and also watched this session on YouTube are excited, especially to listen about the project which Imam Faisal proposes, which I think Tan Sri is, perhaps going to announce tomorrow. That's what I heard. So more work for all of us at IIUM, but I think this is indeed a good initiative which we should start, and we need to get the ball rolling on this project, Thank you very much, everyone. Please turn on your cameras again, so we'll take a photo, inshallah. Okay, at the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. One more time, 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much. Please don't forget to join us tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We'll have a forum as well, which will feature an all-woman panel, because sometimes, there are always complaints which we receive, male. So tomorrow we have a panel which consists of ladies, and at 10:45 there'll be another forum as well, which will be very interesting for us to, I myself am looking forward to, inshallah. So I hope to see everyone, and more. Please invite all of your other friends to join us tomorrow at 9 o'clock for the half-day session, and then we will conclude with this International Humanizing Leadership webinar, inshallah. Okay, everyone. With that, please stay safe, stay sane. I always remind this to my students, it's not just about our physical safety, but also our mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you, Adli. Hope you survive tomorrow. Okay. Assalamualaikum. Take care.
Assalamualaikum, everybody.